Big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick. Christys here on GB News. It's just gone 3 p.m. Here is what I've got for you this hour. 3,000 asylum seekers a month to be deported under Suella Braverman's plans. Do you believe that? And I ask that question because I do not believe the net migration figures that dropped yesterday. We'll be talking about all of that and much, much more throughout the course of the show. Just Stop Oil, they're back at it now. Some individual was heard saying to Just Stop Oil that he needed to go to a hospital appointment, and the guy from Just Stop Oil says, well, I don't really buy that. Excuse me? Why are the police just hanging around and escorting these numpties through the streets of London? In other news, we're also going to be talking about this as well. Has a new clue been found in the hunt for Madeleine McCann? Reportedly it has, but it could take months for her parents to find out exactly what it is, apparently. And yes, well, is she back at it again? Here we go again. See what we did there? There's a rumour, a rumbling of Angela Rayner being back at it with the old taxpayer-funded earpods. Is it true? We'll have to find out when we loads coming your way this hour. Patrick Christys on GB News. Look, it's an eclectic mix today, OK, ladies and gents, because we're also going to be talking, of course, as you will have been hearing in the show previously, about two absolutely devastating, sickening, depraved court cases involving young children being abused and killed as well. So we've got a real mixture today. GB Views at gbnews.com. Get your views coming in. I will be having a debate later on, by the way, about whether or not we should be bringing back the death penalty for child killers. But right now, it's your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over 3 weeks in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years following Jacob's death. Two parents who murdered their 10-month-old son just weeks after he was returned to their care have been jailed for life with minimum terms of 27 and 29 years respectively. A released transcript from a hearing shows the family court ordered Finlay Bowden to be given back to his parents despite them appearing to lie about their drug use. It follows social services asking for a 4-month transition due to having some concerns over parenting abilities. The baby died in Derbyshire in 2020 after suffering multiple bone breaks and burns. The First Minister of Wales is chairing a community meeting in Cardiff after the deaths of two teenagers sparked a riot. 16-year-old Kyrese Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed while riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens just before their deaths. Cars were set alight and windows smashed in the violence, with 9 people remaining arrested following the disorder. Police in Northern Ireland have released new footage of several vehicles used by the gunman in connection with the attempted murder of a senior police detective. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot several times whilst coaching a youth football team at a sports centre in Omagh last February. Officers believe the black Mercedes-Benz was used both before and after the attack to transport the gunman and others away from the scene. 9 men and 2 women, aged between 21 and 72, were arrested this morning, while Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Corrigan provided an update on those arrested.
They've been taken to the Serious Crime Suite in Musgrave Police Station, where they are currently being questioned by detectives. The arrests are a significant development in the investigation. Today, I am also releasing new CCTV footage and photographs of a number of cars used by the gunmen and those involved on the night of and prior to John's attempted murder on Wednesday, the 22nd of February.
An 18-year-old teenager has been arrested again, days after being fined for entering someone's home without permission. Mizzy posted a video on his social media of the arrest this morning. Well, earlier this week, he pleaded guilty and apologised after being handed a criminal behaviour order for filming himself entering private residences and posting them on social media. He appeared at Thames Magistrates Court and has been fined £365. An 11-year-old boy is in a critical condition after being hit by a police car in Lancaster. The force says it was intending an emergency call when the collision occurred last night. The officers are working to establish what exactly happened and referred the incident to the police watchdog. Well, former Met Detective Peter Bleaksley told GB News the next step of the investigation.
The scene of this collision will already have been examined to see if the position of the vehicle or any other vehicles potentially involved, any debris, can give any indicators as to exactly how the collision occurred, together with any tyre marks that there might be on the road, because from tyre marks, traffic investigators can calculate speeds and the like, braking distances, and it's surprising just how much information a tyre mark can reveal.
The Battle of the Atlantic commemorations have been taking place in Liverpool, with the Princess Royal as a guest of honour. It was the longest military campaign in World War II. A service has been held and concluded in fly-past by historic aircraft on the 80th anniversary. Her Royal Highness formally unveiled the new Battle of the Atlantic Memorial Garden. One of the veterans, Ken Benbow, told GB News he will never forget what he went through.
I went in as a boy, I came out as a man. I left school, I couldn't read or write. Everything I did, I learned from the Navy. I'm proud of it, and I thank the Navy.
Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any further details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audiences this morning. Well, it comes after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March. That was for bronchitis, but he quickly recovered following a course of antibiotics. It's GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Welcome along, everybody. Now, people who think record net migration figures are a good thing need to get out more. Big cities absorb huge amounts of migrants. People in leafy rural areas aren't touched by it. But right across the country, there are towns that Gary Lineker and the Bleeding Heart Brigade have never been to and would rather we all ignored. Places like Boston in Lincolnshire, where I visited yesterday. It shatters the illusion that the 1.2 million people who arrived here last year are all high-skilled individuals who benefit our economy. Right in the middle of that sleepy market town are groups of foreign men sitting around, drinking alcohol, smoking drugs, committing crime. People will say this is a lazy stereotype, but I did see it firsthand, and I spoke to the kind of people that the BBC will just ignore, like Chris.
It's the major issue, as you can see or hear. It's they're all sitting there drinking. Just now, outside my shop, there was 5 sat there drinking. Police car pulled up, asked them to move. Police car drove away. They decided not to move. On my phone now, I've got a video of one of them just urinating up the door, and this is all in front of the council offices as well. The council office has the exact same view of me, and they don't do anything about it. Not doing anything.
So what every pro-mass migration politician, political commentator, virtue-stealing lovey should go and do is move to somewhere like Boston, get out of your Surrey mansion and go and live in Boston. But they won't, of course, because they don't want to live in an area that's facing the real-world repercussions of their ideology. The price people in ordinary communities pay for a fraction of a percentage on the GDP spreadsheet is this: more crime, low wages in manual sectors, worse access to public services, a housing crisis, and the reality that they've been lied to by their politicians about any desire to get the numbers down. All over the country, there are places like Boston, places that simply do not see the benefit of record migration. Now, if Boston sounds like where you live, I want to know about it. It's time that we made sure that the reality of the situation was exposed. So that's what I think. I want to hear from you, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and also, .com. I've even got the new email wrong. There we go. But I'd also want to extend a massive thank you to the people of Boston yesterday. It was our net migration special until we were overtaken by events outside Downing Street, of course. And I just want to say a massive thank you. We need to do a bit more of that, I think. I want to do a bit more of that, get out and about. But I'm joined in the studio now by GB News' political reporter, Olivia Utley. Olivia, there's a lot to pick through today, not least the idea that Suella Braverman apparently is planning on deporting around 3,000 asylum seekers a month. Is this correct?
Well, this is a briefing that has been leaked from the Home Office to The Guardian. I don't think these are numbers that Suella Braverman herself is particularly keen to put in the public eye. It sounds as though some civil servants in the Home Office believe, and perhaps they have good evidence to think that Suella Braverman's small boats policy is unworkable in practice. And it seems, reading between the lines again, and we don't know this, but have leaked this document to The Guardian essentially to illustrate the idea that it is an unworkable policy. So what this briefing lays out is that 3,000 migrants, if Suella Braverman was to keep to her plan, 3,000 migrants would have to be deported every month. Now, obviously, that comes with huge, huge costs. Each of those migrants would need a solicitor to sit with them through their case. Those sort of immigration solicitors cost around £75 an hour, and 3,000 migrants, it's not just going to take 1 hour to get through their cases. Also, of course, the cost of the flights themselves. Now, Suella Braverman would argue that the point of the small boats policy is, apart from anything else, a deterrent.
Yes.
If you say that people can't stay in the UK, that they will immediately be deported, then theoretically fewer of them should come over. But it seems perhaps that her civil servants don't believe that. So the way I'm reading this is that perhaps there's a little bit of a disagreement going on in the Home Office between the people who are going to implement the policy and those who are making it.
No way. I mean, no way could that possibly be the case, that an elected member of our Parliament and our Cabinet trying to enact a policy that in a roundabout way the public have voted on consistently for decades would be undermined by civil servants. That can't be true.
May not be the case. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but the fact that this particular briefing was leaked to The Guardian in particular, I think is relatively telling. And of course, this briefing document, was a genuine briefing document created by the Home Office, created for useful purposes. And it doesn't actually, of course, say that the small boats policy is a bad policy, but the fact that it was leaked at this particular moment suggests to me that perhaps civil servants are keen to highlight the idea, which they feel is represented in this briefing document, that the policy is unworkable. And at least
unless, of course, we got more countries involved. This is part of it, isn't it? Because some would argue, and in light of the things that I saw with my own eyes in Boston yesterday, people would also argue that it is unworkable to have huge numbers of people who, despite what people may say, I'm sorry, are not actually working every single day in this country, are not actually actively providing a net benefit to our economy, just lounging around areas. Where do they live? What do they do? How much is that costing the British taxpayer? So it might be interesting if we had a civil service that was focusing a bit more on that side of thing and not, well, we can't possibly deport that many people to Rwanda. So that's the latest in terms of that policy at the moment, as far as we're aware, based around essentially a leak to The Guardian. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
But, of course, what the government is also talking about now, and the focus has sort of switched, given the figures yesterday, to legal migration rather than illegal migration. The government sort of feels that it's at least beginning to get that in hand, the illegal migration problem. The bill's about to go through its third reading in the Lords. Now they're focusing on legal migration, and on that front, it seems as though there is a battle going on at the very top of government, at the very top of cabinet. On the one side, you've got Suella Braverman, who is really keen to bring up the figure at which migrants who are on work visas have to be earning before they're allowed to come here. She believes it should be the median wage, £33,000 or something around that. And they're planning to put it up to that. But there is a lot of opposition from Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, who wants to keep young migrants in the country because it's an easy, quick plug for holes in the economy, and from Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, who is worried about the influence of the impact of taking away foreign students from the finances.
Well, she thought it was a fantastic thing. She said it was great that they'd hit their target 8 years early of the amount of people who were arriving on student visas. And Jeremy Hunt, no doubt, will be looking at those growth numbers and trying to see, well, look, can I massage these numbers slightly? I would just reiterate, I would strongly urge Jeremy Hunt, of course he won't do this, to just go and live in places like Boston and just see the realities of the situation there. Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Rutley, our political reporter. Throughout the course of the show today, I'm going to be talking a lot about this, whether or not the Rwanda plan itself is workable, given that we would need, apparently, to deport around 3,000 people a month. It sounds to me like we're going to have to get other countries on board. But I'm also wanting to drill down on a couple of other elements as well, one of which is about the rapid rate of demographic change in this country. So if we have around 900,000 people a year arriving from non-EU nations, clearly that would imply that there is going to be some kind of demographic shift greater than if we just had mass EU migration in the UK. What's that going to look like? I'm also going to be talking about this, which is an issue that was just blatantly obvious to me yesterday. If people do come as part of the big catch-all policy that the likes of Jeremy Hunt appear to want in order to just massage our economy a little bit, if they come and they work for a little bit and they just decide to not go home and they live in shared accommodation and hang around the streets all day, how on earth do we keep track of all of these people? Because there is no way that anyone is going to tell me that quite a lot of the people that I was seeing in places like Boston yesterday, for example, were actually really still supposed to be here. What were they doing? But joining me now on a slightly different issue, related, though, is the former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Because of this reason, 50 migrants in a floundering dinghy have apparently said no to being rescued by the French Navy. But they were happy to hop aboard a UK Border Force vessel. And a GB News camera, just before I bring Kevin up, a GB News camera got exclusive footage of the migrants arriving on our shores yesterday morning. I might be able to play that for you in a second. Let's bring Kevin back on. We'll bring Kevin back on. Why not? Former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, I mean, this just shows that we're a soft touch, doesn't it? If the French say no, or they say not to the French, why do we have to say yes?
You're quite right, Patrick. This is an absolute shocker. This really is. I mean, it would appear that the migrant boat was well in French waters. The French said that the boat was in distress. They offered to rescue them. as they are required to do, law of the sea, etc. And the migrants said, no, we want the Brits to do it. I just cannot believe it's true. What astonishes me even more is that we actually sent a boat out.
This is the thing. This is the thing, Kevin. It's all very well and good, Kevin. It's all very well and good going, well, I wish that I was, I would quite like to be in Mauritius now. But I'm not. I'm here in Paddington, and as much as I love my job, Mauritius does look quite lovely, especially at this time of year. So just by virtue of getting in a dinghy and setting off from the coast of Calais, if you're in French waters, we're paying the French however many tens or hundreds of millions of pounds it is by now to do their job. A boatload of migrants can say, no, I really would like to go to Britain, please, and then we go and get them.
It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, this boat came off just north of Boulogne. So it's a much longer crossing. It's a much more risky crossing. I understand there were currents in play yesterday, which could have swept the boat further down the channel. So they were definitely in a very risky situation, and the French should have rescued them, and that's the end of it. We should not have been involved at all, and I'm at a loss to understand why we actually deployed one of our boats. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is absolutely astonishing, really, that we went above and beyond. And it does come not so long after there were reports, anyway, that when we had those tragic deaths in the Channel, that people were trying to get help and call for help and things like that. And the French were basically saying, well, they're in British waters, so we're just going to leave them. People died. And whereas we, on the other hand, are willing to go above and beyond. And that is the thing, isn't it? It's a really... Well, I was going to say it's a really tricky one. It's not really, because we can't have people dying. Of course we can't. We can't be responsible for that. But if the French are basically throwing the white flag up, as it were, and saying we're not going to do anything about it, then that has to be us, doesn't it? And I don't understand why we're still bothering to pay them.
Well, I mean, if you look at what's happened in France yesterday with the announcement that 15 French officers are going to be charged with something along the lines of involuntary manslaughter because of the death of these migrants in 2021, that, to me, if I was in charge of the French vessel, I would be rescuing those people so that I didn't have that one laid at my door, since it's entirely in French waters. This is a very simple one. It was in French waters when the distress was first announced. The migrants said, no, we're fine, we'll be rescued by the Brits. No, it shouldn't have happened. Absolutely not.
Kevin, thank you very much, as ever. Kevin Saunders there, former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. A neat little roundup there. As I've said, later on in the show, I'm going to be having a look at what happens when people do arrive here and overstay. How easy is it to keep track of people? Do we even keep track of people? Because it is that idea that leads me to suggest that the numbers that we saw yesterday of those record net migration figures don't actually give us the full truth. I remain resolutely unconvinced that it was only, and I say only there with my eyes wide open, 606,000, the net migration figure. I, for the life of me, refuse to believe that we are keeping track of everybody, or indeed pretty much anybody, actually, who decides that they are overstaying and melts away into the countryside. But you can get loads more on that story on our website. Simply head to gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis and opinion, as well as all the latest breaking news. But another day, another clash between a motorist and Just Stop Oil fanatics trying to stop people going about their daily business. Not just that, one chap leans out of his car and appears to say, I've got a hospital appointment to go to. That guy from Just Stop Oil goes, I don't believe him. Excuse me, do you get to play God? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different.
It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, just in a moment, I will get the very latest on the plans to, apparently, stop animal rights protesters from disrupting one of the world's most famous horse races. And there is an update from Portugal as well on the search for Madeleine McCann. So we'll bring that to you. But just another little piece of news first. Just Stop Oil protesters have clashed with a motorist again. This time, a man drove his car on the pavement to get around these eco-activists. A number of people walked very slowly along the Old Kent Road in south-east London. So at least two police officers can be seen here. One is explaining that the driver says that he has a hospital appointment, so that can be heard in the video, to which a protester says, "I don't believe it." Now, in the end, the motorist loses his patience with what's going on, mounts the pavement, drives off, and there were pedestrians on that pavement. It's just not a safe situation all round, is it, really? I do find that quite frustrating. And do people really get to play God in that situation? Well, I don't believe you got a doctor's appointment. I mean, how do you prove that, really, to someone who's just on the street? And what right do they have? But today's flashpoint came 24 hours after 3 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after throwing orange paint over a display at the Chelsea Flower Show. And someone decided to then hose them down a little bit as well, which sometimes, I mean, the jokes write themselves, don't they? One woman grabbed a hose and doused the protesters with water, which you can see on your screens now, and other visitors said that they'd join in. So there you go. But to be fair, it was quite a nice day, so it looks like it might be quite pleasant, but there we are. Those incidents came after it emerged that policing Just Stop Oil protesters, and this, I think, is really the context that we all need here. So the protests cost the taxpayer £3.5 million in just over a month. Campaigners have been staging protests every single day since April the 24th, pretty much, and the Met Police announced on Wednesday that their bill for just a month was £3.5 million. That is on top of the £7.5 million it cost the police between October and December last year. This is taxpayers' money, your money, my money, everyone's money. And Met revealed as well that 11,000 officer shifts have been spent dealing with Just Stop Oil. So again, it's also the police hours, isn't it? And the time taken off, I mean, it makes Prince Harry's request to have an armed guard look minuscule, doesn't it? But, of course, Just Stop Oil isn't the only group of people who seem hell-bent on messing around with our lives. Animal rising activists have targeted horse racing, and they disrupted the Grand National last month. The Merseyside police made 118 arrests after the start of the race was delayed. Animal rising now wants to cause trouble next week, apparently, when the Derby is on and the Oaks take place at Epsom. So the Jockey Club, which operates the racecourse, has applied for an injunction to try to stop them. Now, we were expecting the result of this injunction probably about half an hour ago. As yet, as far as we're aware, we have not got the result yet, so it might happen any moment. That will be perfect timing, wouldn't it? But I'm joined in the studio now by Nathan McGovern, who's a spokesperson for Animal Rising. Talk us through this injunction. What would it ban you from doing?
Oh, so first of all, pleasure to be here, Patrick. And yeah, I think injunctions are a very little known but very dangerous part of legislation in this country. What they are essentially is it's a way for someone with a lot of money in their pocket to bypass the judicial system and, you know, they can take out essentially what is a private law, which means, you know, if you went and broke it, you wouldn't even receive a trial by a jury, you wouldn't be put in front of magistrates, you could go straight to prison. And I just think that is fundamentally incompatible with democracy.
There's a couple of different types of injunctions, though, obviously, aren't there? So there are the things that I am 99.9% of the time absolutely dead against, which is, like you've said there, celebrities normally doing something rather unfortunate in their personal lives and deciding it would be really great if the public didn't see that splashed on the front of the newspapers, and they use their money in order to stop that from getting out there. I don't think that's right, really. I mean, it doesn't happen to most people, does it? So why should they be able to pay that? This injunction, as far as I understand it, would be to stop you guys going within the area of a racecourse and potentially causing some disruption. So that's the kind of injunction we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But, you know, let's even talk about that. You know, let's say, for example, you know, right after this interview, I you know, run off to Epsom and I run onto the track, you know, potentially committing trespass. You know, what would happen is I'd potentially be arrested and then I'd be charged and put in front of a judge or maybe even a jury. What this would mean is, you know, I could do the exact same thing, but if there is an injunction, I would not even be put before a jury. Right. I would not get my right to a fair trial, which I'm sure you can agree is a cornerstone of democracy.
No, I do understand that. The flip side to this, very clearly, is why should you repeatedly, and this is the aspect of it, it's the repeated nature of it, why should you repeatedly be allowed to break the law in that sense, which trespassing would be? And that's before we've spoken about, I suppose, disrupting the personal enjoyments of people who just enjoy the horse racing.
So, yeah, what this is about, you know, at its heart is the fact that as long as animals are being used and exploited and we have this broken relationship with them and the natural world, there are going to be people who are willing to put their bodies on the line to prevent that harm.
OK, do you think that some of the people, maybe, who are involved in animal rising are themselves being a little bit exploited? Do you honestly think that every single one of them recognises the long-term repercussions of getting a criminal record, having their face put out there all the time? Because people do make different decisions over the course of their life, right? And one day, someone might say, well, I want to go out and get a job or want to go to America or Australia or wherever, and I can't do that because when I was 18 years old, I glued myself to a race post.
So I think what you're raising there is a really, really important question about who we are, who our values are. You know, are we a nation of animal lovers? Do we value food security, for example? Do we love our families? Would we protect them? Would we protect defenceless animals? And I think those are values that don't really go away.
OK, all right. So, look, again, what would happen in your ideal world? There would presumably be no horse racing, which means that there would be less horses. And so would you be willing for animals to not live in order for them to, for you guys to feel better about yourselves?
This is not a numbers question, Patrick. It's a moral question.
I did ask a numbers question, to be fair.
It's about, you know, the rights of animals to be living free from our use and exploitation. Absolutely. You know, if we look at, you know, our farming system, you know, globally about 80 billion land animals die each year for that, about 1 billion of those in the UK. And I think it would be wonderful, you know, if, you know, we had wild horses, we had the environments for wild horses, for, you know, other sorts of wild animals, rather than, you know, the absolutely horrific scenes we see in farms.
Is the sad fact about what you're saying, though, is that in that kind of animalistic utopia, it would actually completely disrupt the ecosystems and lead to more animal deaths and extinctions?
Well, you talk about disrupting the ecosystem, you know, it might shock you to find out that about 16% of the UK is used for sheep farm and only 12%
I saw, didn't you guys nick some of the king's sheep the other day?
Well, yeah, on Wednesday evening, 3 individuals rescued 3 of the king's sheep.
Where
in
are they
sunny
now?
City. They are safe with
Where?
people who care
They're not in a
for
flat
them.
in Islington,
No,
are
they are absolutely not.
You imagine that poor lamb who's in a field, all of a sudden it's under one of your arms, it's living in a bedsit or a disused warehouse.
It's bold of you to assume I could afford property in London, Patrick. You know,
No, but seriously, come on, where are the king's lambs? This is the answer I want to know.
They are safe with people who know how to care for them, and they are going to live long and happy lives now.
OK, if this injunction is granted and you are not allowed anywhere near Epsom, will you still go?
So what I will say is what I said before, is as long as, you know, horses are used in horse racing or animals are used in animal farming, there are going to be people who are willing to put their bodies on the line to prevent that harm.
And you are personally willing to go to prison for this, are you?
You know, I'm willing to accept the consequences of my actions, yes.
OK, fascinating stuff. Thank you very much for your time. As ever, that is Nathan McGovern there, who is a spokesperson for Animal Rising. Like, loads more still to come between now and 4 p.m. As it's reported that police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann have found a relevant clue. I will speak to a man who has investigated the case. And as Jeremy Hunt says that he's comfortable with rising interest rates, that will hurt millions of households. Same guy, by the way, is apparently comfortable just throwing our borders open left, right and centre. What would be the pros and cons of the UK going into recession? Oh, as well, those Europhiles might want to have a quick look at Germany. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Rory.
Cheers, Patrick. The latest from the GB newsroom. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over 3 weeks in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years following Jacob's death. The parents of a 10-month-old boy who murdered him on Christmas Day in 2020 have been jailed for life. His mother, Shannon Marsden, was given a minimum of 27 years, whilst his father, Stephen Bowden, was given a minimum of 29 years. The baby was taken into care shortly after his birth due to child protection concerns, but he was put back into his parents' care 39 days before he died. Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any further details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audiences this morning. Well, it comes after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March. That was for bronchitis, but he quickly recovered following a course of antibiotics. Actor Hugh Grant's damages claim against his son will go to trial following a ruling by a High Court judge. He's accused the publisher of unlawful information gathering. He alleges the paper sent private investigators to break into his home and steal personal information, as well as putting listening devices inside his home and his car as well. The publisher has denied all allegations. You can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website, that is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's have a wee look at today's markets. A pound, that'll buy you $1.2353 and €1.1508 euros. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,579 and 20 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that is currently sitting at 7,622 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Welcome back. Now to news that police investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann have reportedly found a relevant clue during a 3-day search operation. Police in Portugal have sent materials to Germany for testing, and officers searched an area near a reservoir in the Algarve. The number one suspect is Christian Bruckner, and he's denied any involvement in Maddie's disappearance. Di Davies investigated this case back in 2007. I'm very pleased to say he joins me now. Di, thank you. Yes, well, on the face of it, I suppose it depends which way you look at it, doesn't it, really? But relatively encouraging news in the sense that police may have found a relevant clue. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm delighted if they have found something. I've read a number of reports. They were looking for a gun. They were looking for photographs. In addition to possibly any DNA that may have been found from any of the material there or other aspects, including body parts and all the rest of it. I think we will get early next week some indication of what they've actually found, which obviously the world and the world's press are interested in this. It's an amazing story, and how 16 years on, it's galvanized so many interested parties to comment on it. I just hope they can prove, as I've said on your program and others, that if this man is the one responsible, they can provide the evidence sufficient to persuade a court that he is guilty. Of course, at the moment, he is not guilty of this crime, but he certainly has been guilty, as I understand it, of at least 17 other crimes, and he's suspected of more. By any definition, he fits the Brit bill and the profile, again, as I've said many times.
Yeah, he absolutely fits the profile. Di, I want to tap into your knowledge of the way that the police forces work in terms of releasing information, because we are dealing here with a case that has had so much misinformation about it, so much reporting, speculation. So I was initially quite surprised when, given this widespread search, it was known to the public now that they believe they have found something, according to these reports. Now, that appears to be an odd thing to say, unless you are pretty sure you've got something decent.
Well, again, I think they had what they thought from two separate informants back in Germany, who again allegedly broke into this man's house and actually stole items. Now, again, that's pure speculation. What I do know, having worked in Germany and worked with the German police on occasion in a missing persons case, they are very, very conservative, as are their legal equivalent of the CPS. They don't normally release anything unless there's a degree of certainty. Again, I can't comment on the certainty in this case, but they are very conservative normally. But as you say, you know, I've been following this for 16 years. It's amazing how many, you know, Scotland Yard had 64 persons of interest. We still don't know what happened to all of them. 10 million plus has been spent by the Yard. I don't know how much by Leicestershire Police when they took over. It's cost millions, and still we're not that much further forward from an UK point of view. And it seems the Germans are going ahead in leaps and bounds if you take it over, what we didn't do in 16 years.
Yeah, and Di, what people will be able to see on their screens now, if you watch it on TV, you're watching us online. If you're listening on radio, I'll talk you through it, which is essentially at least 3 medium-sized circular holes being drilled into the dirt, and they're surrounded by the shrubbery which has been cut away. Now, Di, again, with your kind of police expertise, really, given the sheer scale of that area, both in terms of water and the land surrounding it, it did appear to be quite a targeted search. And if you look at the bits that they've excavated there, again, that appears to be very, very targeted. What are you thinking when you look at the same images that we're all seeing?
Well, what comes to my mind is the fact that they have retrieved photographs that actually showed either this gentleman or others connected to him in this particular area. Either that or definite information that his camper van was parked at or near this location. And there may be elements. And as somebody often asks me, well, where do you get the DNA after all this time? Well, I often say Richard III. They found his DNA under a car park, didn't they? All those hundreds of years here. So that if there's any segment there that can provide a clue, then that's what they're doing. But I come back to, I think they had definite information, and that information, I think, came from photographs, either in searches of his homes and or other offences that he's alleged to have come to. They definitely had some aspect or inkling that this was the place to search. Otherwise, why would you? It's such a large area, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And just to keep people up to date as well, the noises that we're hearing is that it's been sent off, whatever this item may be, or items, for forensic analysis, and that could take months. But you think, Di, just quickly before I let you get going, you think that it's quite likely that early next week we will get a bit of a steer on what those items were?
Well, I would hope so. Common sense would say it's been sent to X, Y, and Z laboratory. From that, you could possibly deduce what they're looking at in terms of either human remains and or forensic remains and all the rest of it. But I say again, the Germans do not go willy-nilly into these things, hopefully any more than Scotland Yard do. But we've been here before. I just hope this one gives us a way forward for the sake of the poor parents. They must be going nuts over this.
It's non-stop for every time something like this comes up for them, isn't it? You know, but Di, look, thank you very much. As ever, Di Davies investigated this case back in 2007. That was the news that police believe, according to reports, that they found a relevant clue in the search for Madeleine McCann.
Okay, sir. As always,
Di
my
is still on the line. Let's make sure we bring his mic down just in case he says anything he regrets. There we go. Now, moving on. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt seems to be happy to risk the UK going into recession. Is that a dangerous policy, or could it be a good thing? Do you really think that maybe we are due a recession? What would it really mean if we went into one? Oh, what's going on in Germany? And we'll find out how their economy's doing. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. Now, at 4 o'clock, which is not far away now, I will be discussing these plans to apparently deport more than 3,000 asylum seekers a month. I'm also going to ask why so many non-EU nationals are coming to the UK and what that might mean for Britain going forward. But before all of that, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who it's not everybody's cup of tea, has backed interest rate hikes being used to calm soaring inflation. Now, that's even if they increase the risk of pushing the UK into a recession. So Hunt was speaking after it emerged that the Bank of England could raise interest rates from 4.5% to 5.5%. On Wednesday, it was announced that inflation had fallen to 8.7%. Of course, food price inflation is still eye-wateringly high, well over 19%. I am joined, very gratefully so, by the former Chancellor, Lord Lamont. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. It's great to have some of your expertise in here, really. First and foremost, how afraid of the word recession should we really be, do you think?
Well, I think there's a difference between a short recession, when you get maybe a modest dip in output for just a couple of months, 3 months, and something that goes on for a whole year. Sometimes it might be better to have a small, sharp correction to the economy in order to get inflation down, rather than have a period where you don't take action and you end up having a longer recession.
Well, just to expand on that a little bit, because I think, you will know better than I do, but I think that politicians, especially in this day and age, are so ruled by instant headlines and will do everything they possibly can to avoid the front pages of Britain in recession. We know how gloomy our media can be at the best of times, especially about this country, which I find quite bizarre. But really, is he going to try to avoid that being the headline at any cost?
No, well, I think you're right. When you think about it, the definition of a recession, technically, is 2 quarters negative economic growth. That is 6 months. That is not the end of the world if you have 6 months of negative growth. And to have inflation at the present level we have of 8%, which is one of the worst levels in Europe, I regret to say, we are lagging other countries in getting our inflation down. And I think, you know, people have got to remember that this is very corrosive. We know what difficulty people are having with food bills, with energy bills, but they're also having a more general problem just adjusting to the general cost of living. And if this goes on year after year, I mean, if we have 7% inflation per annum, I mean, in 5 years' time, your money's halved in value.
Yeah, which cannot be allowed to happen.
And this leads to strikes. It's quite understandable that people say, oh, I want to be compensated for the inflation that has eroded my living standards. But of course that can't be allowed, because if everybody is compensated for the inflation just goes on and on and on.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions rolled into one, really, which is how competent do you think Jeremy Hunt really is, both as a Chancellor and as a communicator? But also, as well, how much of the blame for the current economic mess that we find ourselves in should be laid firmly at the door of the Bank of England?
Well, first of all, on Jeremy Hunt, I'm not quite sure why you're so critical of him. I think he's excellent. He's only been there a short time, but I think he's done all the right things. I think he made a good attempt at stabilising the economy. I think he has stabilised the economy after the problems we had with the trust budget. Now, I have every confidence in Jeremy Hunt. When you say about the Bank of England, it's a very august, very prestigious institution, but I don't think it's exactly covered itself in glory in the recent past. And although a lot of the inflation that we have comes from imported causes, energy and food prices, obviously the war in Ukraine has caused things to go up in price that the Bank of England couldn't have anticipated, couldn't have prevented. But having said that, what is really worrying about the present rate of inflation, it's not just the over 8% inflation that you referred to, it's the underlying core rate of inflation, stripping out energy, stripping out food. That is still over 6% and has gone up, not down, gone up. And that indicates that there is a domestically generated inflation. And that, I suspect, must have come partly from the Bank of England overreacting to COVID, going on with too low interest rates for too long a period. And everybody got very used to that, borrowed too much money. So too low interest rates. And then also we had the second round of quantitative easing, I think, which was probably a big mistake. And all that, I think, has contributed to domestically generated inflation. And we've got to get the core rate down.
Can I ask you about, in light of yesterday's record net migration figures, a lot of the noise about it is, well, we need this for our GDP. We need this for our economy to thrive. And Jeremy Hunt appears to be firmly in that camp, if the noises coming out of the Cabinet are real and the divide in Cabinet is real there. Where do you stand on that? Because a lot of people now, I think, are saying, at what cost? For the sake of our GDP improving by however much, people's day-to-day lives, I think, now don't feel the benefits of net migration. Are we right to try to put a lot of eggs in the mass migration basket?
I think the present level of immigration is too high and needs to be brought down, and that is the Prime Minister's view, and I'm sure it's Jeremy Hunt's view as well. When people talk about immigration producing GDP growth, obviously if you have population growth, the economy is bigger, but if you have 12 people instead of 10 people, there's more people, it's a bigger GDP of 12 people. That's not making people better off. What we want is specialised, skilled immigration that actually enables GDP per capita to increase in value. And that's what we're not getting. And I think the evidence that immigration adds to GDP per capita is pretty thin, frankly. GDP just expanding, just have a bigger economy when you're a small, crowded island with pressure on your infrastructure is not the answer to our problems. We do need some immigration for some specific sectors where there is a shortage of labour. And we obviously ought, long term, to train more people or automate more in order to fill those gaps. But in the meantime, you may need to import some people to do that. Of course, they don't necessarily need to come here permanently. They could come here for a period of time.
Problem, isn't it? Yeah, look, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and your insight and wisdom, really, when it comes to all of this. That is Lord Lamont, their former Chancellor. OK, so today, as well, very much a shift in tone, this, ladies and gents, I'm afraid, because today the respective killers of two baby boys have been sentenced. Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden, who brutally murdered their baby son, Finlay Bowden, have both been sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, Jake Drummond has been jailed for a life with a minimum of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. These are both stories we're going to be talking about a lot more in the next hour, by the way. Louise Lennon, who was the baby's mother, has been sentenced to a minimum of 10 years after being found guilty of neglect and allowing the death of a child. Joining us from the Old Bailey is our national reporter, Theo Chikomba, with the latest. Theo, yes, what's been going on with you?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. So in the last hour or so, both the couple were sentenced here at the Old Bailey. Louise Lennon, the mother of Jacob Lennon, was sentenced to a minimum of 10 years, and her partner, Jake Drummond, was sentenced to a minimum of 32 years in prison. And before today, we've heard about some of those horrific details, particularly in the trial, about some of the injuries that were inflicted onto Jacob. And speaking in relation to this case, DCI Wayne Jolly had this to say.
This is a horrific case in which Jacob, who was a 15-month-old baby, was subjected to some horrific injuries. They were truly awful and cruel. There were over 20 individual injuries to his body at the time of his death. One of the most significant injuries was the injury to his genitalia, which was cruel and sadistic in its own right. Drummond had subjected Jacob to a period of assault over a 3-week period when he commenced a relationship with Louise Lennon. Yeah, this is extremely unusual. In my 30 years of service, this was a really distressing and emotional case for all of those involved. Louise Lennon would have been fully aware, as a mother of that child, that these injuries were significant and they required medical assistance. The professionals on seeing Jacob when he went into hospital described that they couldn't open his eyes and that he had panda eyes. They had embarked on a web of lies to try and deceive everybody that they spoke to on that morning of the 27th of August.
Well, in his summary, the judge said that the injuries that were seen on Jacob seemed to be non-accidental, and that 20 of the recent injuries were in his upper and lower limbs, and that the couple told lies about their whereabouts so that social services couldn't get in contact with them to help the family at that particular time. So it's a horrific case. The mother sentenced to a minimum of 10 years, and her partner, Jake Drummond, sentenced to a minimum of 32 years.
Great. Theo, thank you very much. As Theo Chikomba, their national reporter. And it does lead me on to one thing that I'm going to be talking about a lot in the next hour, which is about the sentences for child killers and whether or not, actually, the death penalty is the only fitting sentence for somebody who kills a child. I'm also going to be talking about the government set to deport 3,000 migrants a month if Home Secretary Suella Braverman's bill passes. But is this all talk and no action from the government, especially in light of yesterday's net migration figures, which, as we will also talk about in the next hour, I do not believe for a single second. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just gone 4 p.m. Here's what's on the agenda this hour. What will Britain look like in the next 10 or 20 years in light of those net migration numbers that landed yesterday and the rapid rate of demographic change that we are expecting, with around 900,000 people coming from non-EU countries? Are we delving into all of that? Yeah, we're also going to be talking about this as well. Should we bring back the death penalty for child killers? It's a topic that raises its head every single time we deal with vile child abuse cases, and we've had 2 sentencings in one day today. So I thought I would ask this question: should we bring back the death penalty for those people who kill kids? In other news, I'm also going to be talking, of course, about this. The WHO, remember them? I thought they were out of our lives for good. Well, alas, apparently not. Is our government, our politicians, actually seriously going to sign away the ability for us to say whether or not we go into another lockdown just to the WHO? Would you trust them? Would you trust them to decide whether or not it's the right time to restrict our civil liberties all over again? Now, we'll be talking to none other than Esther McVeigh, our very own, about that. She's very animated about that, so that should be a good do. Now, I'm also going to be doing this as well. Yes, OK, so keen viewers and listeners to this show will, of course, know that I am going to be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys on the 28th of June, which is just over a month away, isn't it now? I have had to lose quite a lot of weight, work in progress, and I'll be getting my kit off to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, and you can donate now, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I'm hoping to raise 50 grand. We might do that this show. If you've got a few quid, I would massively appreciate it. Let's save some lives. Patrick Christys on GB News. I am also accepting donations for me to not take my kit off, and we'll see which one of those outweighs it at the end of it. But yes, gbviews@gbnews.uk.com even. New email address. Catches me out every time. I'll see you after the headlines with Rory.
Cheers, Patrick. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over a 3-week period in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years for allowing Jacob's death. Well, in other news, the parents of a 10-month-old boy who was murdered on Christmas Day in 2020 have been jailed for life for his murder. His mother, Shannon Morriston, was given a minimum term of 27 years, whilst his father, Stephen Bowden, was given a minimum of 29 years. The baby was taken into care shortly after birth due to child protection concerns, but he was put back into his parents' care 39 days before he died. Police say the pair were jailed for an incomprehensible crime.
Bowden and Marsden, from the moment Finlay returned to their care, throughout the trial, after conviction, and even at sentence, have never taken responsibility for their actions. They lied and obstructed professionals who were attempting to see Finlay to establish that he was being cared for in the correct manner.
The First Minister of Wales is chairing a community meeting in Cardiff after the deaths of 2 teenagers sparked a riot. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed whilst riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged that showed a police van following the teens just before their deaths. Cars were set alight and windows were smashed in the violence, with 9 people arrested following the disorder. Police in Northern Ireland have released new footage of several vehicles used by the gunman in connection with the attempted murder of a senior police detective. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot several times whilst coaching a youth football team at a sports centre in Omagh last February. Officers believe the black Mercedes-Benz was used both before and after the attack to transport the gunman and others away from the scene. 9 men and 2 women aged between 21 and 72 were arrested this morning. Well, Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Corrigan provided an update on those arrested.
They've been taken to the Serious Crime Suite in Musgrave Police Station, where they are currently being questioned by detectives. The arrests are a significant development in the investigation. Today, I am also releasing new CCTV footage and photographs of a number of cars used by the gunmen and those involved on the night of and prior to John's attempted murder on Wednesday, the 22nd of February.
An 18-year-old teenager has been arrested again just days after being fined for entering someone's home without permission. Mizzy posted a video on his social media of the arrest this morning. Well, earlier this week, he pleaded guilty and apologised after being handed a criminal behaviour order that was for filming himself entering private residences and posting them on social media. He appeared at Thames Magistrates Court and has been fined £365. An 11-year-old boy is in a critical condition after being hit by a police car in Lancaster. The force says it was attending an emergency call when the collision occurred last night. The officers were working to establish what happened and referred the incident to the police watchdog. The Battle of the Atlantic commemorations have been taking place in Liverpool, with the Princess Royal as the guest of honour. It was the longest military campaign in World War II. A service has been held and concluded in a flypast by historic aircraft on the 80th anniversary, while Her Royal Highness formally unveiled the new Battle of the Atlantic Memorial Garden. And one of the veterans, Ken Benbow, told GB News he will never forget what he went through.
I went in as a boy, I came out as a man. I left school, I couldn't read or write. Everything I did, I learned from the Navy. I learned from the Navy. I'm proud of it, and I thank the Navy.
Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any more details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audiences this morning. Well, it comes after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March. That was for bronchitis, but he quickly recovered following a course of antibiotics. Bit of breaking news to bring you now, and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has reportedly had dinner with the former US President Donald Trump. It is thought the two discussed the war in Ukraine. We'll bring you more on those talks a little bit later. But for now, we'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Big hour, there's loads on the agenda. I'm going to start by mentioning something that we'll return to. It's in light of a couple of stories, harrowing stories that you heard in your bulletins there. Should child killers be executed? I pose the question because 2 court cases today highlight the horror of child abuse in Britain. There are certain crimes that make people want to bring back the death penalty. That is, of course, one of them. Child murder, paedophilia, serial killings, terrorism. The question for me is, would it be a deterrent? In my book, anybody who systematically abuses a child, especially a defenceless baby, is a coward. That means that if they were threatened with being executed, then they probably wouldn't do it. There is also this question. Once someone tortures a toddler, leaves them with multiple bone fractures, stubs cigarettes out on their little legs, makes them roll around in their own filth, do we need them taking up our oxygen anymore? There's no chance of rehabilitation. There's no coming back from that, is there? So why not just take them out the back of the courtroom and shoot them? Then there's the financial argument. Why should taxpayers pay £40,000 a year, or however much it costs, to keep somebody alive in prison with 3 square meals a day, a telly in their cell, and a full pouch of amber leaf tobacco at all times? When I sit through 2 court cases today involving innocent infants being abused by these thugs, and I consider the arguments that I've just laid out above, I have to be honest. My view is this. It's not whether or not we should execute child killers. It's how slowly we should do it. Yeah, that's what I think. I'm very, very worked up about all of this. We're going to be having a discussion later on about whether or not we should bring back the death penalty for child killers. GBviews at GBnews.com. But I'm going to return to that story, as I've said. Now, though, to the news that more than 3,000 asylum seekers could be detained and deported every month under the government's illegal migration bill. It's reported that the legislation, which is a key part of Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman's plans to cut immigration, could see the government removing 3,163 asylum seekers each month from next January onwards. And I am joined now in the studio by GB News' political reporter, Olivia Utley, on this. Now, Olivia, you think that there may be more to this story than meets the eye? Because this might sound like good news to people, but apparently it's evidence that it's unworkable.
Well,
reading between the lines, the fact that this briefing, this Home Office briefing, has been leaked to the Guardian newspaper in particular, might suggest that there could be just a little bit of mischief-making going on from civil servants in the Home Office. The suggestion that 3,000 migrants could be deported every month to Rwanda or another third country raises a lot of questions, as you mentioned, about the workability of the plan. They would come with an enormous price tag. You'd have to have a lawyer for every single migrant. You'd have to have a solicitor acting on their behalf. And then, of course, there's the price of the flights themselves, which would have to go off to Rwanda. So this suggests that perhaps there might be a bit of unworkability to the plan. But the fact that civil servants have chosen to leak it to the Guardian right now maybe suggests that they believe that it's not a workable policy and would like to get that what they believe is
I find it astonishing that when it comes to certain things like a war in Ukraine, money is no object. When it comes to certain things like putting up hotels for asylum seekers, money is no object. We'll give the French a load of money to not police their coastline. Our money's no object. That's all absolutely fine. In the middle of the lockdowns, we'll pay for every Tom, Dick and Harry to have a fake living, etc. That's all right. But then when it comes to actually protecting our own borders, that's a bit pricey, isn't it?
Yes, there is certainly an element of that. I think there is another serious question about the practicality of the plan, which is how many migrants can Rwanda actually take? Ministers have talked quite a bit about setting up third-party agreements with other countries, and that sounds like a sensible plan. But until we know more about those, until those agreements have actually been made, it's hard to see that Rwanda could take this kind of numbers of migrants, if this is actually what it would be. Of course, Suella Braverman would argue, and ministers and allies would argue too, that the purpose of the small boats bill is mainly as a deterrent.
Yes, exactly.
So you'd want to be seeing fewer than this number being deported.
Potentially, it could act as a bit of a one-off cost, couldn't it? Because once people started seeing that 2,999 of their mates have been deported to Rwanda, it might make people think twice about making that journey across the channel. Olivia, thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, political reporter. Now, something really stood out for me yesterday. I was out and about in Boston. I decided, in Lincolnshire, not Massachusetts, I decided that I wanted to go to the epicentre of the Brexit vote. That place is the Brexit backing capital of Britain. And also, as well, it's the least well integrated. So it's a perfect little microcosm about mass migration in Britain. So I went over there yesterday, did a show from there before we were overtaken by events because someone drove into the gates of Downing Street. But we found out yesterday, didn't we, that more than the net migration figure for 2022 was 606,000. One stat really caught my eye. While 151,000 EU nationals came to the UK last year, 202,000 left the country. But there was an increase, a staggering increase, in net migration from among non-EU nationals. A massive 925,000 arrived in the UK, while only 263,000 left. And this got me thinking, really, what kind of thing can that mean, just in kind of practical geographic reality, for the demographics of Britain? Yep, we will, of course, have people immigrating from America, from Australia, from countries like that, but also, let's be honest, from parts of the subcontinent, from Africa. So to find out what all of this really means, I'm joined by Matt Goodwin, who's Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent. Matt, great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much.
Great to be with you, Patrick.
Is Britain going to, well, look very, very, very different in about 5 or 10 years' time with this rate of immigration from countries who are outside of the EU?
Well, the short answer to the question is yes. We are seeing really the continuation of this experiment with mass migration that really began under Tony Blair and New Labour, but over the last 2 years has changed, as you suggest, in a number of important ways. Most people who are now coming to the country are coming from outside of the European Union. We know, by the way, Patrick, that those migrants tend to make less of a contribution overall to the UK economy as people from within Europe. And the pace of change, which is a crucial point, especially in areas of the country like Boston and Skegness, the pace of change is going to become much quicker, largely because the domestic British population are not really having as many children as they're used to. And so immigration is now the primary driver of population growth here in the UK. So we're going to see some really sizable changes. I mean, if I give you one stat, for example, by 2040, it's estimated that if we continue with the current level of migration, we'll have somewhere around 5 million more people in the country, which is, nearly 5 Birminghams, to give you an example of what that means in terms of population change. So this is going to be dramatic, and it's going to be very rapid.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, yesterday, as I was walking around Boston, it's possibly the only time I'll ever say this, is I wished I was with Gary Lineker, because that is the kind of place that he doesn't want people to go and see. People talk about big picture net migration stuff, and look at what this has done for our national economy. And then he goes to Boston, and I don't hate to say this, because this is the reality of the situation when you see places like that. It reminded me of something that President Trump said about, they're not necessarily sending their best. And I thought, this is the reality, actually, because there's a lot of people in Boston who will be looking around there and thinking, what net benefit do I get from these record-breaking net migration numbers? When you see people who are sitting around, not doing a lot all day, working in very, very low-skilled, low-paid jobs, often in massively overcrowded houses, etc. That is the kind of immigration that doesn't really get spoken about enough, I think, Matt.
Well, look, I mean, one of the things I've spent much of this week doing on Twitter is pointing out to people that mass migration is actually really a symptom of a deeper problem in this country, which is we've got a political economy that's been brought in by the left and the right, which has basically reshaped our economy around cheap migrant workers from abroad, often low-skilled workers, in order to serve the interests of large corporations and a kind of socially liberal, radical, woke, progressive elite who want to exhibit their moral righteousness over the rest of the country, a la Gary Lineker being one example. And, what we're seeing, unfortunately, today is immigration being used to conceal many serious, deep problems in our country. I'll give you one example. If you look, for example, at how much we're paying per year on housing illegal migrants in Britain, that's 1.3 billion. Patrick, that is more money than we are currently spending on levelling up funds across the Northwest and Northeast and Yorkshire combined. That's just one example. You can look at the NHS. You can say, well, why don't we have enough doctors? Well, I'll tell you, the answer is we're not expanding the number of medical places for British kids, and we're relying on importing doctors, often from low-income countries, who often haven't done as much training and skill development as domestic British doctors. So wherever you look in our economy, wherever you look in our society, whether it's welfare, housing, NHS, my criticism here is mass migration is being used by politicians on the left and the right to conceal the difficult choices that they are failing to make. And voters aren't stupid, they can see it.
No, absolutely not. And voters tell politicians every single time they are given the opportunity exactly what they really want to see from them when it comes to controlling our borders. And Matt, you do a lot about the, I suppose, psychology, really, of a lot of these virtue signalling lovies who decide that they know best when it comes to migration. Fascinating, is it not, Matt? That a lot of these people would never set foot in Boston, certainly wouldn't choose to live there, or areas like it. You mentioned Skegness. And one of the main reasons behind that, although they won't be honest with you about this, I suspect, Matt, is that they don't like it because they wouldn't like a lot of the people there and they wouldn't want to live in the same situation as the locals now face themselves in as a result of net migration at record levels. Would you agree?
Well, what I often talk about is what I call luxury beliefs and what other scholars have called luxury beliefs. And what I mean by that, Patrick, is people in the elite who advocate ideas which bring them very few costs, which they use to signal their status to other members of the elite. But the unfortunate thing about luxury beliefs like mass immigration, open borders, no real limit to refugees, gender identity, let's allow kids, girls to become boys and boys to become girls. The problem here is actually many other people in society do pay the costs of those decisions. People in Boston and Skegness, people in Clacton down the East Coast. You'll meet many British workers, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, who'll tell you straight up that actually the decisions that were taken over the last 20 years had enormous costs on them, their family and their communities. So there is a hypocrisy that comes with the new elite in Britain. And, it's not only migration, Patrick. I think you and I have talked previously about family. It's the new elite that says, everybody should live the way they want to live. be free, make whatever choices you want to be, but they're also the most likely to get married, stay married, and have kids within marriage.
Yeah.
So there is a hypocrisy that goes on here. Maybe the way around this, is we should do something like what Ron DeSantis did in America. He sent a lot of people crossing the southern border up to Martha's Vineyard. Well, maybe we should perhaps send everybody to Oxford, Cambridge, Brighton, and Bristol, and then just see what the reaction is. Maybe that's 100%. A natural experiment to test the real commitment of the new elite to these policy decisions.
I could not agree more. Matt, thank you very much. Could chat all day, but we're out of time. Matt Goodwin there is Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent, talking a heck of a lot of sense. In the next hour, on this migration topic, I am going to be discussing this. If somebody comes to this country and overstays and basically goes into hiding, how on earth do we keep tabs on them? Because yet again yesterday, firsthand, with my own eyes, you can just see it happening. And I want to know what we're actually doing about that, because it casts a complete shadow over the actual reality of these net migration figures. As devastatingly high as they are they even true? Is the reality even worse? But you can get loads more on that story on our website. Simply head to gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis and opinion, as well as the latest breaking news. But now to some breaking news. And it's an update on a story we covered in the last hour. OK, so a High Court judge has granted the Jockey Club an injunction which is aimed at stopping animal rising, disrupting 2 huge horse race events next week. 118 people were arrested when animal rising protested at the Grand National last month, and they're planning to stage demonstrations at the Derby and the Oaks next week. But this injunction prohibits individuals from entering the racetrack and carrying out other acts which could disrupt the races. That news has just broken. Right, OK. So, as many of you know, shifting tone, I am counting down to Wednesday, June the 28th, mainly because I can't wait for this to be over, when I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who say they are the most famous male strippers in the UK. I'm doing 3 routines on the night, including a performance completely on my own, otherwise known as a solo. I met the lads earlier this month to learn the dance moves, and I will be strutting my stuff in Bromley in Kent in just over a month's time. I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, and next week I'm going to be showing you I am really doing my bit. I'm taking it very seriously. I'm losing a heck of a lot of weight, and it's actually making me quite miserable. But I'm delighted to say that we have raised more than £47,000. You can donate, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Thank you to everyone who's given. Everything from £2.50 to £2,000, which has happened. The reason I'm really doing this, mental health charity Mind, suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40, which I think is absolutely ridiculous in this country. That is a proper pandemic, isn't it? I will be doing my bit. I promise you I'm taking this very seriously. I'm trying to get myself in decent shape, which for me is a massive effort, and I'll be getting my kit off on stage. Let's try and save some lives. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Right, OK, so if we can hit 50,000, that would be amazing this show. OK, if you thought the COVID lockdowns were bad, then get this. The World Health Organization might be given the power to impose more lockdowns on us. When I come back, I'll be telling you why. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. In a few minutes, on the day that 4 people are jailed after 2 babies were murdered, I will be debating whether child killers should face the death penalty. But different story now, because here's a story that will send a shiver down your spine. Ministers fear that lockdown measures could be imposed on the UK during any future pandemics. New plans will give the World Health Organization, remember them, the power to order countries to follow its instructions during a pandemic. And I think this is pretty flipping sinister. A number of Conservative MPs have written to ministers on this issue, and one of them is the wonderful Esther McVeigh of this parish. And Esther joins me now. Esther, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Right, talk me through why you think this is such a bad idea.
OK, so all of a sudden you see the World Health Authority land-grabbing, taking extra powers. So instead of it being, which we had it as, an advisory organisation, it's now turning into a health organisation with compelling powers. So it could tell people to lock down, it could tell people, you know, about sort of vaccinations, vaccine passports, and it would have this overall control, which it was not meant to have.
Yeah.
So a group of us who believe in parliamentary scrutiny for the laws that rule our land to say, hang on, before this happens, and it's all happening very quickly, like at this moment in time, they're changing the international health regulations, we're saying, please, let's see the draft text that you're going to send an intergovernmental negotiating team to negotiate on. Let's see those texts in Parliament so we can negotiate on them, see what we think, and have a say in what's going on.
This is the kind of story that gets lost in the noise. There's always big news about it. There's always breaking news on. Yesterday was a prime example of that. Net migration numbers drop, and we've got also, you know, there's some person driving a car into Downing Street. So this stuff goes unnoticed, right? So people are now drafting up some kind of plan to put to the WHO to see that could essentially give them the power to put us into lockdown, and we don't know what's in that plan or under what circumstances they could do that.
Exactly. But straight away, what we're doing is giving the power of authority to them. We're conceding our power that it goes to them, and it will be like a majority vote. And we're saying, no, let's put a brake on that. Let's see what that is. Let's debate it in the House. Because, first of all, I mean, questions will be asked about the WHO. People were saying it was, you know, a puppet of China, huge China sort of influence through it. And at a time when people are questioning all of the influence of China, it definitely had it through here. And remember, this would be then an organisation that not only tells us what to do, dictates what it wants to do, it's then also going to be telling us how much money we should be putting into it, which is 5% of your health budget, plus, not yet decided, but a percentage of GDP as well. So not only does it have powers to tell us what we can do, it also has financial powers as well.
And what have we looked at over the course of the last 4 years or so and thought, that's the reason why we should give the WHO more money and power over our lives? Why?
Well, I don't think there is. I mean, at the moment, I mean, there's still debates. I mean, we saw China had a big say in WHO. We saw, was it a Wuhan leak? Well, everybody went to the defence of China. You've seen who's the Director General was somebody from Ethiopia who was put in by China. So what we're saying is, look, this is going too fast. The negotiations are now. This will have been completed by May next year. That's how fast things are going. And we're saying, can we put the brakes on? Can we see in Parliament what it is you're planning to give away, and can we negotiate it and stop it?
And without people like yourself, this would have just gone unnoticed, really, would it? It would have just been waved through and we would have woken up at some point.
I mean, there's lots of things people will agree with the World Health Authority. They'll say the cooperation's right, the transparency's right, the working together as country, all of that. We don't have a problem with that. And, of course, it is an advisory body. It's going above and beyond that. And, as I said, this would then dictate to us what we do. As I said, lockdown, vaccine passports, border closing.
It is very easy to see how this plays into the hands of people who genuinely believe that there is something much more sinister going on. I would also add to that I think this is a way of our governments devolving responsibility, being able to blame somebody else. So when we were in the European Union, it was quite easy to point the finger over there and blame them for everything. And now, unfortunately, very unfortunately, in my view, since we've left the EU, we've proven to not be particularly great at running some of our own house as well. I just wonder whether or not this might be another way of us doing that, of going, well, it's the WHO's responsibility, it's not ours. And I don't want that for Britain. I want us to be in control.
And that's what a lot of people wanted. They wanted to at least know what was happening. The ability to vote out a set of politicians, if you don't like them after 5 years, you say, well, we don't like you, don't move on. Well, we couldn't do this. This was, in a way, an unaccountable body that is there. And when you have sort of majority votes, so actually Bangladesh is putting through quite a few of these rule changes again, which is the financial changes. So I think you're right. People are handing over responsibility to other people. Well, we don't want that, and as parliamentarians, we don't want that. This is our job to scrutinise these changes.
But this is the kind of thing that the public should have a vote on, is it not? If whether or not we devolve responsibility for the major calls on our personal freedoms and the way that we organise and orchestrate health issues in this country, I think the British public should have a vote on whether or not we decide to keep that in-house.
I think there's a vote and there's also full transparency people want. So us as MPs, you'll know, we've got to declare our interests, so you'll know all about us. I think that's important. So we want to have control and we want to know what's going on. So who is funding the WHO? Who does have significant say on it now? And I think it's those influencers which feed into this sort of sinister conspiracy, whatever you are, think that, you know, this is what we want to understand. So we're a group of MPs saying, do you know what, this is our job, to scrutinise legislation, and before you negotiate something, let's see what you're negotiating and let's see on the floor of the House if this is what people want.
Completely reasonable. Thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, and I'll be tuning in tomorrow as well. So there, joining me now. Get your views coming in. GBViews at GBnews.com. Loads more to come between now and 5 o'clock. After 4 people were jailed following the murder of 2 babies. We will be debating whether people who kill children should face the death penalty. It's a question that you all email in about whenever a situation like this is happening. Unfortunately, it seems to be happening more and more regularly. But first, it's your headlines with Rory.
Cheers, Patrick. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over a 3-week period in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years for allowing Jacob's death. In other news, the parents of a 10-month-old boy who murdered him on Christmas Day in 2020 have been jailed for life. His mother, Shannon Marsden, was given a minimum of 27 years, whilst his father, Stephen Bowden, was given a minimum of 29 years. The baby was taken into care shortly after birth due to child protection concerns, but he was put back into his parents' care just 39 days before he died. Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any further details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audiences this morning. Well, it comes after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March. That was for bronchitis, but quickly recovered following a course of antibiotics. Actor Hugh Grant's damages claim against The Sun will go to trial following a ruling by the High Court judge. He has accused the publisher of unlawful information gathering. He alleges the paper sent private investigators to break into his home and steal personal information, as well as putting listening devices in his home and in his car as well. The publisher has denied all allegations. And in the last half hour, it's been reported that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had dinner with the former US President Donald Trump last night. That was in the States. It's thought one of the things the two discussed was the war in Ukraine. We'll have more on those talks a little bit later on. But for now, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
The respective killers of two baby boys have been sentenced today. The parents of 10-month-old Finlay Bowden, Stephen Bowden and Shannon Marsden were both given a life sentence for brutally murdering their baby son. And Jake Drummond has been jailed for life with a minimum of 32 years for murdering 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jacob's mother, Louise Lennon, was handed 10 years after being found guilty of neglect and allowing the death of a child. Whenever cases like this arise, the question of the death penalty always also arises with it, doesn't it? Whether or not the death penalty for child killers is something that should be brought back. And I thought, let's discuss it. So I'm joined by the barrister Chris Dorr and GB News' very own presenter Michelle Dewberry. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Chris, I'll start with you. Do you think we should have the death penalty for child killers?
No, we shouldn't have the death penalty for anyone. It's something that's a relic from 3,000 years ago and even longer. I think the real question is, how do we learn from these tragedies to stop them happening again? And I can guarantee you from 30 years of experience of criminal law that bringing in the death penalty for the killers will not stop further killings in the future, because it never has and it never does.
Michelle, I'll bring you in now on that then.
Yeah, I completely disagree. I absolutely think it's time to at least certainly review this. I would probably put it out to a referendum, quite frankly. This whole notion that you would apply kind of capital punishment, the death penalty, to somebody as a deterrent to somebody else doesn't really wash with me. I would apply the death penalty for the simple fact that actually, if you have it in you to torture, grossly abuse these children, sometimes, by the way, your own child, for a mother, particularly, to be able to give birth to a child and to treat their child like that, for me, there is zero even chance of redemption. You cannot come back. You cannot rehabilitate a person like that. So in the cases where it is beyond any reasonable doubt, where you've got conclusive evidence backed up by whatever means necessary, DNA, whatever it is, then in those cases where absolutely categorically you are guilty, you have tortured and murdered your child, then why on earth would we not consider the death penalty?
One of the big arguments against the death penalty, Chris, of course, is miscarriages of justice. In absolutely nailed-on cases, then that wouldn't be the case. I suppose that's out the window. I suppose, as Michelle was alluding to there as well, there's no rehabilitation, in my view, with these people. Why would we even want to try? Why would we want to have the financial burden of whatever it costs every single year to keep these monsters in prison? Is it not just better to execute them?
No, I mean, I don't know if Michelle knows anything about these people at all in making these judgments. I wonder, Michelle, would you apply that to someone with severe mental illness? Would you apply it to someone with an IQ of 70? Literally anyone that killed a child?
Well,
Where's your limit?
I've got to be honest, I find it quite interesting that your first go-to point is in terms of mental health issues and all the rest of it, because in the case we just heard today, you'll be, of course, familiar with the fact that they want things like their age to be considered as a mitigating circumstance. The fact that this lady today that we heard, is she about 20? Well, I'm sorry, but you know that torturing your own child is wrong from the very, well, I would say from the day you give birth. And if you don't, there is something wrong with you, quite frankly.
Are you going to execute people with severe psychosis, with mental health problems, with severe learning difficulties? Are you going to execute them, Michelle, rather than just blabbing on about punishment and revenge?
Hang on, Patrick. So to answer you directly, you've asked me a direct question. If someone's got, I don't know, postpartum psychosis or something like that, which is provable, demonstrable, and that is why they have acted that way, then no, of course not. Why would I do that?
Not any other form of illness, but such as severe, chronic, long-term drug addiction, which is not someone's fault, as I'm sure you think it is.
But so that's an interesting point, because that played a key role in at least one of these horrific incidents that we're talking about today, which was
questions around that. Why are people addicted to drugs? Why are people in this situation? Because we have a ludicrous law on the misuse of drugs, which we've had for 50 years, and that's responsible for every one of these cases.
OK, Chris, could I just ask you on this? Because I know that in your capacity, obviously, as a barrister, you are skilled at making arguments, and I do think that there's quite a bit of deflection taking place here, which is that I don't want to get dragged into the notion of whether or not we should legalise drug use. I'm going to hit you back with a question now, Chris. Why do you care more about the rehabilitation of drug addicts than you do about dead kids and getting justice for them?
That's nonsense.
So
what I care about is reducing the number of kids who get murdered, and you don't do that with the death penalty. Go to America, see how many people they execute, and see how many children are murdered. It's a hell of a lot more than we have here.
So can I progress your thought process then? So what you're telling me is if there is a situation where somebody is not in control of their faculties, whether it is a mental health issue, an addiction problem, or whatever the excuse, and we can agree to disagree on those excuses, but by your logic then, hold on, let me ask you the question, please, I haven't finished yet. By your logic, if someone is in control of their thoughts and then they torture and kill their child, would you be in favour of the death penalty then?
Absolutely not, because the death penalty fundamentally increases the amount of crime and violence in the societies that practice it. Any society that has the death penalty has higher levels of violence and higher levels of murder. I don't know if you've ever researched any of this, Michelle, if you know anything about criminal justice.
I think maybe, Chris, there is also a moral point, though, here, isn't there?
But why are we going down, why are we looking at this, about the impact of the death penalty on an individual on other crimes? I'm not talking about that. I'm not coming from this from a perspective of deterring someone else acting in this horrendous way. What I'm talking about in isolation is the death penalty as a consequence, as a punishment to that single individual. You're extrapolating it up and looking at it as a consequence on the impacts of other people. I'm not talking about that.
So your position is vengeance is the most important thing, even if that vengeance causes more crime and more deaths.
I don't regard the death penalty as vengeance. I see it as a form of punishment. I don't see the death penalty as a vengeance. I see it as a form of punishment. I found it quite a cost-effective punishment, actually. And by the way, you could even throw this out to the relatives of the victim and let the relatives of that victim to decide. Do they think that that would be inappropriate?
And let everybody in the village throw fruit at people that commit crimes. That's a good idea. Rather than just having a balanced, fair justice system that allows independent judges to look at all the facts, apply the evidence to decide the best sentence, let's have an opinion poll on the death penalty.
But
wonderful. That's a really wise system and fair system of justice in any
Well, Chris,
society.
Firstly, I think you've been a bit silly. I'm not talking about people chucking strawberries in the local town centre. Firstly, I would actually be in favour. I would be in favour of having a referendum about introducing capital punishment as a potential sentencing option. Yes.
Go on, Chris. It's amoral to kill people. Killing people is utterly amoral, and the society paying people to murder on its behalf is about as amoral as it gets, because there's no excuse for grown-up, civilised individuals. There are excuses and explanations for some people, but not if a society chooses to become a murderer as a society.
But then I and many people don't share your moral compass. I don't think it is abhorrent morally to terminate the life of an adult who has tortured a child. I don't.
And so, Chris, quite clearly, you don't think there are any circumstances whatsoever in which the death penalty is fair justice, even for somebody who cannot be rehabilitated, is an absolute monstrous and the most unspeakable.
It's not about fair justice. That's not the issue. The issue is twofold. One, what is the moral rights and wrongs of knowingly taking a life? For me, that's wrong, unless it's in self-defence, unless it's a necessity.
And that's the key point of difference, isn't it?
And life without thinking about what the consequences are. Michelle,
and that's the key point of difference, isn't it? I get it, and that's the crucial aspect of this, though, because some people would say that there are some crimes for which they themselves morally can justify saying, look, I'd execute this person. Other people would say, no, it's a hard and fast.
But is that what our justice system comes down to, morality?
Miscarriages of justice in murder cases have been going on for centuries, and there's no such thing as 100% nailed-on case, as you suggest. There is no such
Chris,
thing.
I'm going to have to park it there for you, Chris. I did give the first word to you, so Michelle, I'll just let you close and then we'll wrap it up. Go on.
Well, look, I'll put it bluntly. If someone tortured my child and it was proved beyond any form of doubt, then I would be absolutely perfectly comfortable with that person having their life taken away from them as well.
OK, look, both of you, thank you very much. Hey, all right, OK, we're going to have to park it. I'm going to get shouted at in a minute, and so are you. Chris Dorr, there, barrister, thank you very much. And GB News' presenter, Michelle Dewberry, who'll be back on a little bit later on to say what she's got coming up. Thank you, Michelle. Great stuff. OK, right, get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews.com. Big debate, that, big discussion. Now, here is a subject, though, that is very close to my heart. Apparently, Rishi Sunak thinks more Northerners should be given a knighthood. Yes, that's right. Let me know what you think, all right? There's a ridiculous north-south divide when it comes to people being given knighthoods. I'm sick of these Southerners getting the knighthoods, all right? It's time that someone knighted me, you know, to a lesser extent, someone as great as, you know, Alan Turing was, or someone like that. Definitely not Liam Gallagher, though, please. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, so welcome back, everybody. Now, in the next hour, I will speak to a Just Stop Oil activist after it emerged that it cost the Met Police £3.5 million in just over a month to cover the protests. And today, they apparently stopped somebody who was trying to get to a hospital appointment. But to a story that really interests me. Apparently, Rishi Sunak wants more Northerners to get knighthoods and other top awards. It's said that in the last honours list, people from London got 21% of the award, but only 13% of the population actually live in the capital. I am joined now by broadcaster, journalist, proud Northerner. It's Mike Parry. Mike, thank you very, very much. Why should we knight more Northerners?
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for inviting me on your show and giving me the opportunity to sing a song for the north of England, OK? I was born and brought up in Chester. That's the northwest of England, that massive Merseyside belt and into Manchester, up to the Lake District and all that. And you've got to remember, and I want, people to put this into their head, the north of England created this country. There aren't any town halls in cities and villages in the south of England, and that's because the Industrial Revolution, which made this country great, started, developed, and went out around the world in the north of England. The dark, satanic mills of Lancashire created this great country that we're in. But we get no representation now because 2/3 of the population lives in a line between the Wash and Portsmouth like that, OK? Government is down in the southeast. And, you've only got to be a civil servant for about 20 years in Whitehall, and guess what? You get a gong, you get an OBE or an MBE, or you get a knighthood. Now, let me focus on sport and show you how unbalanced it is, OK? There has never been a sportsman from the world of football who's been given a baronetcy. Now, Lord Seb Coe, right? Lord Colin Cowdrey, Lord Botham, who, of course, made his career in a southern county, Somerset. But why isn't Bobby Charlton a lord? Bobby Charlton's the most famous sportsman we've got in this country. I was in the Atacama Desert in Chile once, OK? It's a very remote part of the world. I bumped into a man who was selling lemonade on the roadside. He said, "Where you come from?" And I said, "I'm from England." He said, "Bobby Charlton." Now, why is Bobby Charlton not the first football lord that we should ever have? Why was Sir Stanley Matthews never made a lord? Do you know why? Because They come from the north of England. Stanley Matthews, Blackpool. Bobby Charlton, Manchester. It's an absolute disgrace. There's a discrimination against northern people. On the previous feature you've just had on your show, you had Michelle Dewberry, a wonderful lady from Hull, and she has an accent from Hull. I bet you she never is made a Dane, and one of the reasons would be because she's got that wonderful Yorkshire accent. There's terrible discrimination against people in this country from the north, and I want to see it rebalanced, and Rishi Sunak is giving it lip service, but I want to see the people in the north of England who've done things like built and started the metro system in Newcastle upon Tyne, who've tried to make the links from Lancashire to Yorkshire across the M56 better. Why aren't they rewarded? They don't just sit on their backsides in Whitehall for 20 years. They get out there and they do it for the people of Northern England.
Some of them sit on their backsides and talk rubbish every day on national television like me. Where's my knighthood? Come on, I need this. I need this, Mike. Look, thank you very much. It's great to hear... It's great to hear somebody talk so passionately.
I think you've got a few years to go yet to prove yourself. I don't doubt you at all, but it might take a bit of convincing amongst the greater population. If anybody deserves an award for their services to journalism and being a communicator, it's obviously me.
It's you. Right, well, there you go. You know what? I hope that we get a little bit of... If we get the kind of northern tokenism that you and I are trying to champion here, right, then we can both have it, right? Because I'd love it.
It's not tokenism. Well, I mean, I'll go back to Manchester. Sir Alex Ferguson, the most successful football manager in history and in this country. Why is he not being made a lord? Everybody else gets made a lord for doing nothing. But... I mean, a lot of these politicians are just made lords to get them out of the way for doing anything else. That's not a very good reason, is it, to be made one of the aristocracy in this country? Bishops are made lords. What do bishops do and contribute to our society that the vicar from my local parish in Hull, Chester, doesn't do, who works very hard on council estates in Chester? He should be rewarded.
I've got to go, Mike. I've got to go. Thank you very much. Mike Parry there, proud northerner, in case you couldn't tell. Now, yes, I've got loads more coming your way in the next hour, including I am drilling down onto whether or not, and indeed how, we keep tabs on people who overstay their visas. I'm not sure we are doing.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good evening, it's Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just gone 5 p.m. and it's a busy final Friday hour. Here's what I'm going in with. Is there a big net migration con going on? I've got a really sinking feeling that those numbers from yesterday are an underestimation of the reality. Why? I do not see how on earth we're keeping tabs of people who overstay their visa in this country. I'll be getting to grips with that. Now, Just Stop Oil, at it again, the old slow walk Orange Brigade, aren't they? Well, some chap in his car today shouted at them, "I've got a hospital appointment." And Just Stop Oil said, "We don't believe you." And he had to go on the pavement. So I find this bonkers. Are they playing God now? It does appear pretty heartless, if you ask me. I'll be talking to someone from Just Stop Oil. And also, whisper it quietly, I might have a very special guest for you on this topic. Viewers from earlier on in the week will know who I mean. Right, and also I'm going to be talking about all of this. Trans cyclists have been banned from competing in elite-level events. Common sense at last, I think, people. So now women who train their entire lives to operate at the elite level of an incredibly tough sport will not be beaten by someone who was born with the name Gary. I think we can all agree that's a great move forward. Finally, I'm also going to be talking about this. Yes, I am, of course, dancing on stage with the Dream Boys, getting my kit off, not for fun, because it will be something that no doubt haunts what remains of my hollowed-out career. But please donate, because I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. We're hoping to get to £50,000. We are nearly there, and I'll be getting my kit off on stage with the Dream Boys on the 28th of June. Let's save some lives, people. That email address is gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep your emails coming in thick and fast. Look, I'm going to rumble on as well with a big debate that we had in the last hour. I want to know from you on this. Do you think that people who kill their children should be executed? Should we bring back the death penalty for child killers? We have two devastating cases, which I suspect you're going to hear a bit more about in the bulletins very shortly. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, it is your headlines.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over 3 weeks in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years for allowing Jacob's death. Well, in other news, the parents of a 10-month-old boy who murdered him on Christmas Day in 2020 have been jailed for life. Finlay Bowden's mother, Shannon Marsden, was given a minimum term of 27 years, whilst his father, Stephen Bowden, was given a minimum of 29 years. The baby was taken into care shortly after birth due to child protection concerns, but he was put back into his parents' care just 39 days before he died. Police say the pair were jailed for an incomprehensible crime.
Bowden and Marsden, from the moment Finlay returned to their care, throughout the trial, after conviction, and even at sentence, have never taken responsibility for their actions. They lied and obstructed professionals who were attempting to see Finlay to establish that he was being cared for in the correct manner.
The First Minister of Wales is chairing a community meeting in Cardiff after the deaths of two teenagers sparked a riot. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed while riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged that showed a police van following the teens just before their deaths. Cars were set alight, windows were smashed in the violence, with 9 people arrested following the disorder. Police in Northern Ireland have released new footage of several vehicles used by the gunman in connection with the attempted murder of a senior police detective. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot several times whilst coaching a youth football team at a sports centre in Omagh last February. Officers believe the black Mercedes-Benz was used both before and after the attack to transport the gunman and others away from the scene. 9 men and 2 women aged between 21 and 72 were arrested this morning, while Detective Chief Superintendent Eamon Corrigan provided an update on those arrested.
They've been taken to the Serious Crime Suite in Musgrave Police Station, where they are currently being questioned by detectives. The arrests are a significant development in the investigation. Today, I am also releasing new CCTV footage and photographs of a number of cars used by the gunmen and those involved on the night of and prior to John's attempted murder on Wednesday, the 22nd of February.
An 18-year-old teenager has been arrested again just days after being fined for entering someone's home without permission. Mizzy posted a video on his social media of the arrest this morning. Well, earlier this week, he pleaded guilty and apologised after being handed a criminal behaviour order for filming himself entering private residences and posting them on social media. He appeared at Thames Magistrates Court and has been fined £365. An 11-year-old boy is in a critical condition after being hit by a police car in Lancaster. The force says it was attending an emergency call when the collision occurred late last night. The officers are working to establish what exactly happened and referred the incident to the police watchdog. The Battle of the Atlantic commemorations have been taking place in Liverpool, with the Princess Royal as the guest of honour. It was the longest military campaign in World War II. A service has been held and concluded in a flypast by historic aircraft on the 80th anniversary. Her Royal Highness formally unveiled the new Battle of the Atlantic Memorial Garden. And one of the veterans, Ken Benbow, told GB News he will never forget what he went through.
I went in as a boy, I came out as a man. I left school, I couldn't read or write. Everything I did, I learned from the Navy. I'm proud of it, and I thank the Navy.
Bless him. Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any further details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audience this morning. It's after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March. That was for bronchitis, but quickly recovered following a course of antibiotics. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
OK, I have got some big breaking news for you. We were trying to track this chap down. Not chap, hero, OK? This is the individual who pushed Just Stop Oil out of the way on Blackfriars Bridge on Tuesday. You know that white van man that stood up and the police went after him and they didn't go after Just Stop Oil? We've tracked him down and we are set to talk to Lewis Greaves live here on this show at just after 5:30. So in about 20 minutes' time, we will have Britain's hero, the national treasure, Lewis Greaves. Thank you very much, everybody. We were trying to track this guy down. I promised to buy him a pint, So I will be doing my best to meet up with this guy, get him a pint, and you never know as well, we might have a little award for him. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, because we will be greeting, throwing our channel's arms around this national treasure a bit later on in the show. Good man, Lewis. Now, moving on then. We start with the news that more than 3,000 asylum seekers could be detained and deported up to every single month in the government's illegal migration bill. It is reported that the legislation, which is a key part of Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman's plans to cut immigration, could see the government remove, very specific this, 3,163 asylum seekers each month from January onwards. Now, a little bit later on, I'm going to be talking about, given my experiences in Boston yesterday, by the way, if somebody does just enter this country under the pretence of having some kind of visa and then decide not to leave, how on earth do we keep tabs on these people? And that, for me, makes me think that our actual net migration figures are potentially a little bit skew-if. But just to talk about the deportation side of things first, GB News' political reporter Catherine Forster joins me in the studio. So, 3,000 people a month or so. I think a lot of people might be thinking, that's great. Other people say it's unworkable.
Well, I suspect this is a worst-case scenario, and I think it's important to say this is a story that The Guardian broke this morning. It's leaked documents that have been given to them suggesting that this might be the number 3,000 a month from January, which would obviously be A, hugely difficult, and B, massively, massively expensive. And they're saying, well, the lawyers would have to be paid considerably more money, and is this really workable? But of course, the whole point of the illegal migration bill that the government are pushing through Parliament, it's currently in the Lords, where it's going to struggle, is that once they start sending people on a one-way ticket to Rwanda, people will then think, hang on a minute, I'm not going to cross from France and risk my life because I'm not going to be allowed to stay, and therefore I'm not going to go. I mean, it's all about reducing the pull factors. So the whole point of it is, the thinking goes, once people are going to Rwanda on a regular basis, the numbers crossing the channel will start to fall very dramatically.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, sure, it's possible, but I would have thought it was very unlikely. Would you cross the channel if you were going to be sent to Rwanda?
Absolutely not. I used to do a thing on a show here called Friday Night Feast, and I used to challenge Christys every single week, and it was a hard no when I floated the idea, quite literally, that maybe I should try to cross the channel. They thought it would be too risky. So I wouldn't do it at the best of times, although I do think I probably would have been successful. A lot of people seem to be. But I think this is, in light of us not being able to turn the boats back, or being unwilling to turn the boats back, this presumably is the next best thing. I suppose the government's argument would be, it's the deterrent, really, and whilst there might be an initial outlay of money in legal fees, if it stops the boats coming, then we stop paying for it, I suppose. The big question for me, though, Catherine, is how did this story get out there? Again, it's in The Guardian, isn't it? Is this more leaking, is it?
Well, only The Guardian knows, and of course they will always protect their sources, but obviously it's a bad news story for the government, so my suspicion would be that it's come from somebody who is not in favour of this bill, who is effectively trying to make trouble for the government.
No, absolutely. Well, look, Catherine, thank you very, very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter, just filling you in on the latest, because these are the kind of noises coming out, which is, it's in The Guardian, which is that Suella Braverman's plans could see around 3,163 people deported every single month under the Rwanda scheme. And people are saying that this is a terrible thing. I can't help but wonder whether or not quite a few people watching this show, let me know, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com, would think that that wouldn't necessarily be a worst-case scenario. That's the kind of numbers that it would equate to being a deterrent, actually. And I wonder whether or not you guys think that. Get in touch on the inbox. I'm going to delve into the inbox very, very shortly. But yesterday I was out and about in a place called Boston in Lincolnshire. And Boston is a very, very special place. It is the Brexit-backing capital of Britain. More than 75% of people there voted for Brexit. Clearly, a big part of Brexit was to take back control of our borders. Then, yesterday, what happened? Well, the net migration numbers were revealed, and they're at record levels. And so we had 606,000 people arriving. Well, in fact, we had 1.2 million people arriving, but net, that's 606,000. Now, I was very, very keen to drill down on whether or not, if people overstay their visas, they are actually checked up on and indeed deported. It's all very well and good talking about people who we can spot a mile off, quite literally, coming across the channel in the boat, arriving in Dover, being put in hotels or processing centres and then deported from there. But what about the people who arrive on whatever kind of visa and just decide to overstay? And the reason why I decided that I thought I wanted to talk about this was because I could see it with my own eyes yesterday in Boston. There was absolutely no way that the vast majority of the people lounging around all day in the town square, drinking alcohol, smoking drugs, clearly not working, were really here on, I would suggest anyway, work visas. And I would suggest that because they can't speak English. You tried to talk to a lot of the people there. And this is also, again, a representation of what the locals had to say to me. And hopefully, very shortly, I might actually be able to play you a little clip from a chap called Chris Martin, who was speaking to me yesterday about the impact of mass migration into his town. We played you that clip earlier. I hope to play that to you again in a couple of moments' time. But it got me thinking, really, how on earth can we possibly say that these people are really contributing to the economy in that regard? This isn't the high level of migration. And one thing that kept coming up time and time and time again for me was locals, local councillors, local politicians, local activists saying that when they go round to people's houses and they go door knocking, they're seeing far too many people living, 10 people per house. 19 people per house was one of the actual records that we seem to be able to set there. It seems to me to be incredibly easy to get to Britain on whatever kind of visa, or maybe even saying that you're coming on a holiday, and then do a little bit of work and then just not go home. And I wanted to find out how easy it was to actually just stay. But this is the kind of person that I think other news outlets should be talking to a lot more, OK? I've just spoken to you there about people who, in my book, there is no way whatsoever that these people are either really here legally or are contributing to our economy. When we talk about these net migration figures being at record highs, I have to be honest with you, I suspect they are a lot higher. And I spoke yesterday to a chap called Chris Martin, who owns a business in Boston, in Lincolnshire. And he had this to say to me about the state of his town.
It's the major issue, as you can see, or hear, it's they're all sitting there drinking. Just now, outside my shop, there was 5 sat there drinking. Police car pulled up, asked them to move. Police car drove away. They decided not to move. On my phone now, I've got a video of one of them just urinating up the door. And this is all in front of the council offices as well. The council office has the exact same view of me, and they don't do anything about it. Not doing anything.
Quite clearly, not enough resources. You would have to go door to door in Boston to see who was there and to check them. But it's all very well and good making out that our net migration is great for our GDP on a national picture. But you go to places like Boston, you go to places like Skegness, you go to anywhere around the UK that is really outside a major city, and you ask ordinary folk in those towns that have seen a huge influx of rapid population growth and rapid demographic change, and you ask them whether or not they feel the better for it, and all too often you will get the answer, no, I absolutely don't. And those are the kind of places that Gary Lineker doesn't want to go to, doesn't want to see. He certainly doesn't want to live, does he? He certainly doesn't want to send his kids to school there. And no, that is the reality of the situation. But I can't help but feel as though that net migration number is actually a lot lower than what we are being told, of that record of 606,000, because I think we are not deporting people who have no right to be here. And on top of that, when we look at this leak in The Guardian, again from the civil service, it would appear to be from the civil service, leaking against the democratically elected government minister, saying, oh, Suella Braverman's plan is unworkable. 3,000 people a month, it can't possibly happen. We can't possibly send that many people to Rwanda. Well, no, we can't possibly send them to Rwanda, can we? We have a huge amount of other countries that we could send them to as well. And the cost of it, they say, oh, well, it costs far too much to do it. Well, how much does it cost us? How much does it cost us to not do it? If we continue to have illegal migration at these levels, how much is that going to cost us in the long run? But as I repeatedly being shouted at in my ear, it is now time to go to our website. Simply head to gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis and opinion, as well as the latest breaking news. Now, a reminder that I've got a huge interview coming up a little bit later on in the show. The motorist who shoved 2 Just Stop Oil protesters off the road earlier this week will be speaking live to me a little later on in the show. It's Lewis Greaves, that's his name. He was briefly detained by police on suspicion of common assault. Of course, the police did nothing about the protesters who were stopping people going about their business. And as you can see, there he is. And then the police pile in. We wanted to buy this man a pint. We wanted to tell him that we think he's an absolute national hero. And we've got him, people, so he will be on this show very shortly. As many of you know, though, I am counting down to Wednesday, June the 28th, and I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who say that they are the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. Viewers on GB News can see some of the men who I will be performing with on the big night right now. Look at those. They are Adonises. I will never look like that. Good grief. Am I really performing with them? He's wiggling. Oh. So this is the kind of thing, right, that I'm going to have to do. But I do it willingly, people. I will humiliate myself willingly because I'm doing it to raise money for a very, very good cause. It's the mental health charity, when you see it like that. The mental health charity Mind, OK? And you can donate now, indeed, please do, to justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Our target is £50,000, and I'm delighted to say that we have now raised more than £47,500. So thank you very, very much to everyone who has given money so far, even if it's just £2, £5, whatever it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It means the world to me. Mental health is a genuine, proper pandemic that we're seeing in this country at the minute. Every single day, 12 men sadly take their own lives. Suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40. And I read all of the comments on that donation page there, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I won't read all of your names out now because of sensitivity issues, etc. But so many of you are getting in touch and saying, look, I'm giving you £5 because, sadly, my brother, my son, my father, whoever, took their own lives. And that is depressing, to say the very least, but it does go to highlight how big a problem this really is. And I really hope that, I know that times are tough at the moment, but if you've got a few quid, I would massively appreciate you chucking a couple of those quid into this justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And hopefully we can raise a lot of money and save some lives. So there you go. I will stop rattling the can now. There you are. Thank you very, very much. Right. Just Stop Oil has once again caused more havoc in our country's capital. This time a man drove his car onto the pavement to get round the eco-activist. He said he had to go to a hospital appointment. They said, we don't care. Are they playing God? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. A reminder that I have got a huge interview coming up a little bit later on in the show. The motorist who shoved two Just Stop Oil protesters off the road earlier this week. Your working man who got out of his van, who snapped and said, enough is enough, get out of the road. Well, I've got him. We said we wanted to track him down, and thank you very much to whoever managed to point us in his direction, but we have got him. Lewis Greaves is the man's name. He was briefly detained by police on suspicion of common assault. Of course, the police did nothing about the protesters. In fact, well, they did. They were giving them an escort through the streets of London, which is remarkable, isn't it? So I'm going to be chatting to Lewis a little bit later on in the show. He is indeed viewed by many people as a national hero. But would you believe it? Just Stop Oil protesters have clashed with a motorist again today. This time, a man drove his car on the pavement to get around the eco-activist. In fact, this man was saying that he's got a hospital appointment. A number of people walked very slowly along the Old Kent Road in south-east London. We can't play you the audio on the clip, unfortunately, because there's quite a lot of swearing involved. But at least two police officers can be seen there. One is explaining that the driver says he has a hospital appointment, to which the protester just says he doesn't really believe it. And in the end, the motorist loses patience with what's going on. He gets on the pavement and drives off. So there we go. With me now, though, in fact, today's flashpoint came 24 hours after three Just Stop Oil activists were arrested after throwing orange paint over a display at the Chelsea flower show. So there they were lobbing paint, and one woman grabbed a hose and doused them with water, and other visitors said that they would join in as well. Those incidents, of course, came after it emerged that policing Just Stop Oil protests had cost the taxpayer £3.5 million in just a month. Campaigners have been staging protests every day since April the 24th, and the Met Police announced on Wednesday that their bill for just a month was £3.5 million. That's on top of the £7.5 million it cost the police between October and December last year. Taxpayers' money, your money, my money, friends and family's money, and the Met revealed that 11,000 officer shifts have been spent dealing with Just Stop Oil. 11,000 officer shifts when we've got stabbings and all of this stuff going on. I am joined now by James Harvey, who is a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. James, thank you very much. What right do you have to stop a man getting to a hospital appointment? What if he died?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Patrick. It's quite an intro. Actually, it's been a very busy few weeks for Just Stop Oil. It's really unfortunate that anyone is delayed in getting to any appointments, whether that's hospital appointments, work appointments. But the fact of the matter is people are dying right now in the UK and abroad because of the crisis we're in about emissions that are caused by oil and gas. And the government...
and that's the point, James, isn't it? It's not caused by that bloke in his car trying to get to a hospital appointment. I'll ask you again, what right do you have to stop him getting hospital treatment?
Look, we've got a long history of peaceful protest in this country that's bought us our rights of freedom to protest, that's bought us our rights of votes for women, LGBTQ rights. The only way we seem to be able to get change, unfortunately, is through civil resistance.
Is it working?
Well, I think it is, yes. All major political parties, apart from the Tories, have said that they support Just Stop Oil's demand of no new oil and gas and no new coal as well, because the government's going a bit mad and wants to take us back to the Victorian age up north. So I think it is working, and the majority of the public do support our demand. Now, the methods are going to be controversial.
No, wait, do they?
Well, I think they do. Yeah, I think most reasonable people know.
No, there you go. You see, there you go. You're asking people to trust you on the facts, aren't you? And you can't prove. You can't. No. You can't prove, can you? Live here on national television from your lovely gaff in Norwich, you can't prove that most people really support your demands, because they objectively don't, do they? They objectively don't. Have you got massive proof for that?
There's been lots of polls that have been done about gov.uk do polls all the time about different things. And I think the results are out there that people do understand that the climate crisis has to be dealt with. Look, I know lots of my friends, lots of my family, lots of people that I meet on the streets just do support our demands. But let me just say, I've got this question to ask you, okay? The UN say we have a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a survivable future. What should we do? Because our corrupt and criminal government aren't doing anything. What should we do, Patrick?
I don't have to answer those questions, James. What I want to know is why you don't care about ordinary men and women getting to hospital appointments, and if you understand how deeply unlikable you come across as being.
Yeah, we're not out to win friends. It's horrible that people are delayed, but we're trying to take action to save lives.
If he died, would you care?
Oh, absolutely. There was a person that delayed getting to their father's funeral last year, and I remember talking to a radio presenter at the time. It was awful that anyone has to go through that.
But you understand? No. You know what terrorists say, right? Who are really ideological about their cause. They say, I'm really sorry that people had to die. And then someone points out they didn't have to die, actually. So when people like you come on shows like this and you say, oh, I'm really sorry that people have to... You're doing it, OK? You're the one doing it. And you don't have to do that. If you had any bottle whatsoever, you would go to China and do it over there. Because even if we enact all of the stuff... all of the stuff that you want us to do, it will make no difference whatsoever unless the likes of the Chinese government get on board. So I will make you an offer again now, OK? I did this to somebody else on Just Up Oil before. If I buy you a train ticket to Beijing, will you go over there and protest over there?
The government wants to open over 100 new oil and gas fields in the North Sea that aren't going to benefit us at all. Why do I need to go to Beijing to protest when our own corrupt government is making decisions that are endangering life?
They have polluted the atmosphere more in the last 8 years than we've done since the Industrial Revolution. And the reality is you are very comfortable sitting around in your lovely, cushy house in Norwich, ruining people's lives. Yeah. Ordinary working people in this country who go out and have to work for a living. I don't know what you do. What do you do?
I'm a project manager.
You're a project manager, right, OK, lovely stuff. So you have really no idea what it's like to have to get in a white van every single morning, put your overalls on and go out and fight day in, day out for 10 quid cash in hand, 20 quid cash in hand, right? These people who have to do that, but you'll sit there and you'll pontificate, all right? But you won't actually have the backbone to go to China and stick it to the people who are doing most of the environmental damage, will you?
Look, you've said it yourself. We've got a long history of emissions in this country. We're still opening new oil and gas fields. We need to take action here against our criminal government. We can do that. I acknowledge that I'm in a privileged position.
But take it against the government. Why are you taking it out against people like me? Why are you taking it out against ordinary working class people? Why don't you go and take it out the government? You're a professional nuisance.
Look, because we know that civil resistance works.
But it's not working.
In protest, that it causes the tension, it causes the discourse that gets us on programmes like this, Patrick. It gets the government to react, and the government are reacting at the moment. They are reacting. And
I thought you said they weren't.
Are coming round to no new oil and gas, which is what we need. Now, anyone that gets disruptors, again, it's really regrettable, but it's going to happen in any form of protest.
OK, look, James, I'm going to leave you there. I hope you enjoy your massive cushy pad in Norwich and your lovely job as a project manager where, you know, you probably get to absolutely rake it in whilst you inconvenience, you know, ordinary people on way to hospital appointments. Bye, James. James Harvey there is a just spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Right, loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. Cyclists who were born male are to be banned from racing in elite female British cycling events. And I will be speaking to the scaffolder who was apprehended by police earlier this week after he pushed Just Stop Oil activists off a road in central London. It is not to be missed. But right now, it's your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of 15-month-old Jacob Lennon. Jake Drummond, the partner of the toddler's mother, was jailed following a campaign of cruel and sadistic abuse. The boy suffered multiple injuries over a 3-week period in 2019. The victim's mother, Louise Lennon, was jailed for 10 years for allowing Jacob's death. In other news, the parents of a 10-month-old boy who murdered him on Christmas Day in 2020 have been jailed for life. Finlay Bowden's mother, Shannon Marsden, was given a minimum of 27 years, whilst his father, Stephen Bowden, was given a minimum of 29 years. The baby was taken into care shortly after birth due to child protection concerns, but he was put back into his parents' care just 39 days before he died. The First Minister of Wales is chairing a community meeting in Cardiff after the deaths of 2 teenagers sparked a riot. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed while riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens before their deaths. Pope Francis has skipped meetings today because of a fever. The Vatican hasn't provided any further details on the 86-year-old's health, but has said he didn't receive anyone in audience this morning. It's after he spent 5 days in hospital at the end of March for bronchitis. That's it for now, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a quick look at today's markets. The pound, that'll buy you $1.2342 and €1.1516. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,576 and 24 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that has closed the day at 7,627 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Now, to a huge interview with a true British hero. Construction worker Lewis Greaves shoved 2 Just Stop Oil protesters off the road on Tuesday after they'd brought traffic to a halt in central London. I'm very pleased to say we've tracked him down. He's going to be on the show. In fact, he joins me over the phone now. Lewis, you there?
Yep, all right. Louis.
Yes, good stuff, mate. OK, fantastic. Can I just say, we had an absolute explosion of love and support for you, my good man. Thank you very much for talking to us over the phone. Can I just, first and foremost, I would love to offer to buy you a pint. So if you're ever in the area around the Paddington Riviera, please do give me a shout because I would love to buy you a pint. But can I just ask, what was going on for you? What was going through your head at the time? What happened?
So, of course, there was already troubles on the railways anyway. And I had to get off the train station. I was in the car and all that, trying to get over the bridge. And then, of course, they're just standing there, making me even more late for work. And there's 2 police officers just standing there looking at them. Like, they're not doing their jobs. So if they can't do it, then the members of the public start doing it for them.
How did you... What is your job, mate? Do you mind me asking? What is it that you do? Because you were obviously pretty desperate to get to work that day.
Yeah, I'm a scaffolder. So, of course, I have to get to work. Like, some jobs you can get lots of people there, some jobs you don't. So, of course, at this job, we didn't have many people there, so I need to be in. Otherwise, everyone else there is going to struggle as well. So I had to be in work.
And when you gave them a shove, what were the police say? What were the police saying to you?
Well, they were swearing at me and just pushing me. They pushed me onto the other side of the road and then back into the other side and then into a van. But they were just sitting there swearing at me and shouting at me. And then that was it, really. They just kept on asking for my name and address and everything like that. Just saying that they never said I was detained for breach of the peace. Originally, they said I was detained for common assault. And of course, then the next morning, they ended up just dropping everything. They said the case was closed.
Yeah, well, a bit of common sense prevailed there. I mean, I would seriously question, though, why on earth that this lot of numpties are given a police escort through the streets of London, stopping people like you getting to work. I have just actually had one of those numpties on this show a few moments ago from his absolutely massive house in Norwich, where, of course, he works as a project manager and therefore clearly does not have to go and graft every single day. And what would you say to people like him who say, we're really sorry, but we have to do this to you because we're all going to burn to death if we don't?
Yeah, well, there's the thing I probably would say, I probably couldn't say live on air, but it's one of them. I don't see, because they can send 20 police officers to a bunch of kids playing in a park, but then they want to send 2 officers to 20 protesters standing in the middle of London, making the whole of London angry. I just don't see how that's logical. And then they say they've invested money and all that and putting 11,000 officers onto the street to stop the protesters. So why was there only 2 at this incident?
Well, it does seem, mate, you're saying what, frankly, pretty much everyone's thinking, right? Which is, you want to get to work, you have to be at work. These people need to be moved off the road, and why are you the one who's getting targeted by the police and all of this? What would you say to people who say you overstepped the mark, you were a bit heavy-handed with them?
Well, no, I don't think I was. They've done it multiple times now. They've stopped traffic on motorways and in central London, as you can see. They've destroyed things, and I don't think they should be allowed to carry on going along with this. Of course, there's been instances before where someone has run them over, and the police can see there's things are happening, and they're not going to stop. But the thing that I don't understand is that the members of public don't decide how the government spends that money on, technically. So why are they targeting us?
Is that your main thing, which is... Go on, carry on, mate. Carry on with that.
I just don't understand why they're going to attack the members of public and ruin their days and stop them from earning money when the people they're stopping from getting to work are the people paying their taxes, which of course the money adds up into that fund that the government gets to spend. Why would they stop it?
What would your message to Just Stop Oil be?
If you want to have a real effect, go to the people that can actually make a change, which they're not.
Do you think that Just Stop Oil are against the working class?
Well, yeah, I think that most of them don't have jobs. As you can see, they've perfectly got enough time in their day to sit in the middle of the road. So they don't understand that nowadays things have gone up in price. If you don't work, you don't earn. If you don't earn, then you're going to struggle paying your bills. You're going to struggle putting food on your table.
And your message, presumably, to the police or to government would be, instead of having the police officers there walking them through the street, why don't they have police officers making sure you get to work?
Exactly the same as what Germany did. You see 6 protesters walk into the middle of the road. They didn't even get a chance to actually sit down, and them officers gone straight over them, pulled them off and pulled them to the side. It took 10 seconds. Instead, we're paying police officers a full day's wage to sit there and follow them about.
Would you do it again?
I would do it again. I say that on a level. I don't think what I did was wrong.
No.
But of course, as most people grow up being told by their parents, violence is wrong.
There's violence and then there's violence, though, Louis, isn't there? You know, and I've had a look at
the police. The police can come over and if I push how I push them protesters, and the police can be double as violent as how I was, and then start swearing at me, and then say they're going to arrest me for the things they're doing anyway. I don't see why were them officers not detained. They've just done exactly the same thing, if not pushed me further.
You think the police officers should have been the ones arrested?
I believe there was 2 officers, and I believe that white officer was violent. And I've had a lot of messages saying that it looks like that police officer was out to hurt me. Of course, I don't believe it. Don't get me wrong. I don't. In that incident, I do believe the Met have messed up, but I do have faith in some of the things they do. But I know they messed up. But that officer was, as other people have said, was out to hurt someone.
Now, Louis, can I just say thank you very much for coming on the show and talking to us, and it is genuinely really great to chat to you. We here at GB News we're a fan of your work, mate. We're a fan of your work, all right? Yeah. And we will be getting in touch with you because we would love to present you with the GB News People's Champion Award, which we have decided you will be the first recipient of the GB News People's Champion Award. So we've got your details. We will be in touch. And look, thank you very much for standing up for the average common man and woman on the street who needs to go out and earn a pound note every single day, and for trying to whip a few people into shape. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Lewis Greaves there, of course, and we'll be in touch. Good stuff. All right, look. Loads of people have been getting in touch on that, and yeah, I cannot wait to buy that man a pint and present him with an award. But moving on, cyclists who were born male, talking men, are to be banned from racing in elite female British cycling events. Common sense, yes, but finally it's happening. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Right, OK, so cyclists who were born male are to be banned from racing in elite female British cycling events, which I think we can all agree is common sense. Under a new policy published today, racing will be split into two categories, female and open. I am joined now by Olympic silver medalist Sharon Davies. Sharon, thank you very much for hanging on the line for us for a little while there. A victory for common sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it's taken us quite a long time to get to this point, you know, and obviously World Swimming, World Athletics have done this, and at long last now cycling in this country, not world cycling, unfortunately, but hopefully they'll follow later this year. You know, we know at the moment there is no way that you can mitigate against male puberty. So we were asking female athletes to start their races knowing that the person next to them, if they were a transgender woman, had an advantage. And that just was never fair. So we had fair sport for males and unfair sport for females, and now we've got fair sport for both of them. The open category is a great way of making sure that everybody's included, and of course everybody should be included.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the irony, of course, is that some of the full-bodied men who were competing in women's sports wouldn't even qualify for the elite levels of the men anyway, so we're probably unlikely to see most of them at all now. But why has this been such a fight, Sharon? Why does this matter so much to you?
Yeah, good question, isn't it? I mean, originally the fight started with a very bad decision from the IOC. And they didn't bother to look at any of the science whatsoever. They literally just listened to the propaganda. They didn't invite any athletes. They didn't invite scientists across the spectrum. They just passed this sweeping, you know, statement that until it could be proved different, there was no advantage to being a transgender woman. Well, that's ridiculous, because that's like saying there's no advantage to being a male, and yet we have men and women's sport, and we have done for forever for obvious reasons. And so it was really that the emphasis should have been on the world of transgender sport to say, right, prove to us that there is no advantage that's still retained. And of course, they can't do that. There's been 17 studies so far, and not a single one of them has shown that.
Just quickly, Sharon, what about some form of compensation or reparations for all of those women who lost, whether it's gold medals, prize money, sponsorship deals, whatever it is, or even, in fact, just dreams, right? You get a lot of college athletes in America, for example, who might have fallen foul of this kind of thing. What about some form of compensation for them, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had too many situations here in the UK. It's much worse in America. At the moment in American cycling, there's 50 transgender women. So that's trans-identifying males that are in elite women's sport, cycling. And so there's a lot of people that are missing out in the States. We've just had a young girl in their California track and field who came fourth. There was a transgender athlete that was second, and now she doesn't qualify to go through to the state championships.
Yeah.
And that's a young girl with her dreams, you know. So the emphasis has always been on the dreams of the transgender athlete, but no one's been taking any notice of the dreams of the young females in their own category of sport. And this doesn't affect males, of course, because including transgender men in men's sport makes no difference whatsoever.
Yeah. Look, Sharon, can I just say thank you? And also, as well, you are one of the people, very few people who I interview who I think you are on the right side of history, really, and it's going to have an incredible legacy beyond, obviously, your own career generally.
Patrick, I just wanted to be on the right side for the girls because, you know, all those years ago, nobody really stood up for us during that East German era, and I could not stand by and let it happen again. So that's the reason.
Brilliant. Look, Sharon, thank you, and thank you for being so patient with us as well whilst we rattled through a few other stories. There's Sharon Davies there.
You're welcome.
She's Olympic silver medalist and just legend, really, isn't she? Well, as many of you know, I am counting down to Wednesday, June the 28th. I will be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys, who say that they're the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. Viewers on GB News can see kind of what I'm going to be doing, although I'll look very different when I do it. These are the Dream Boys doing their performing, doing their dance routine. Look at the flipping size of them. I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And yes, people, I'm delighted to say that we've now raised more than £48,000. Well, you have. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. The target is 50 grand, OK? So thank you, everyone who's been raising money. John and Marion have put 50 quid in, thank you. Maureen's chucked in a fiver. Rhodes has given me a fiver. Terry's put 20 quid in. Maxine, 10 quid. Thank you. It's for Mind, the mental health charity. Let's save some lives. Jubes is back. She'll be on next. You were on before. You're back on again now.
I'm desperate to sit next to you, quite frankly, Patrick. I can't help myself. I think it's your links, Africa. That conversation that we had a minute ago about whether or not capital punishment for chapters, that got a huge reaction.
Has it? I can imagine.
Yeah,
most people
lots
back
of our
you
views.
there, right?
Yeah, lots of our views on the side of common sense, I would argue, quite frankly. Liking that debate and saying that, yes, it is time, even just for a referendum, why don't you give it to the people and let the people decide?
Yeah, well, people don't like it when people decide things that
actually, I don't know what I'm saying, because you'd have a referendum, people would vote, and then you'd spend the next 4 years trying to overturn the referendum, and they would be more divided than we perhaps even are now, so careful what you wish for. Anyway, I've reunited two of my Friday faves tonight, Alex Dean and Paul Embry.
Fantastic.
We'll be getting into lots of the stuff tonight, so don't go anywhere.
Lovely stuff. Michelle, thank you very much. What a show it's going to be. See you in a tick. I'll see you next week, in fact. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update for GB News from the Met Office. The weekend promises a lot of fine weather. There will be a fair bit of cloud around in some spots, but generally some sunshine, staying dry, feeling warm in the sunshine, although this cold front will introduce a slightly cooler feel, particularly as we go through Sunday and Monday. But a big area of high pressure dominating our weather, meaning a lot of dry conditions out there. Some cloud over northern England, breaking up a little bit this evening. The cloud is thickening ahead of that weather front across northernmost parts of Scotland. A little bit of light rain and drizzle is possible here by dawn. But for most places, dry and clear and quite chilly, actually. Temperatures certainly in rural spots 2 or 3 degrees, so not too far off freezing. So a fresh start to the weekend, but sun's up early and the sun is strong, so it'll soon start to lift those temperatures. It will stay predominantly cloudy through the morning over the Highlands and the Western Isles. A bit of a damp start here as well, but that rain edging into the mainland of Scotland, kind of fizzling out as it does so. So brightening up in the far northwest. Sunny spells for the majority. A cooler feel in the far north, but elsewhere temperatures a little bit higher than today's values, more widely into the 20s. Cooler again on some coasts for sure, but inland we could get 23, maybe 24 degrees. And quite a pleasant Saturday evening. We will see a bit more clouds spilling down, initially over northern England, then into eastern England to start Sunday. But again, generally it's going to be another fine day. Just a bit more clouds on Sunday over these eastern counties of England. But even here we should see still some sunny spells. A brighter day in northern Scotland. Plenty of sunshine for most places. Not quite as warm. Temperatures just a degree or so down, so high teens, maybe low 20s still in the south. But these coasts in the east in particular, with a bit of a breeze from that, will feel fairly fresh and a cooler feel for most again on Monday. But again, for the majority, it's dry and fine with sunny spells. The sun, though, is pretty strong this time of year.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg.